Madison was waiting for her husband to come home from work, cooking dinner. But when she opened the door, she was heartbroken to see May 4. Madison was in the kitchen cooking dinner. She was enjoying what she called family time. "Madison, when are we having dinner?" Looking into the kitchen, asked Richard, the girl's fiancé. "A couple more minutes and everything will be ready." Madison smiled. "I can't wait," the young man muttered. He sat down at the table and watched the bride's manipulations. "If someone had helped me a little, we would have had dinner a long time ago," Madison jokingly told him. "What are you implying?" Richard was indignant. "Nothing," she stroked the young man's hair. "I was just saying that if you had helped me in the beginning, everything would have been ready long ago." "I'm not just sitting at home, by the way," Richard pouted. "I'm developing a cool program that will cost a lot of money. That's why I don't have time to do housework. And that's the kind of thing a girl should be doing." "I know," honey. Madison kissed her fiancé on the cheek. At that moment, the doorbell rang. "Who the hell is this?" Richard asked in surprise. "You know I don't have the gift of foresight," she joked. But when she met her fiancé's stern gaze, her playful mood disappeared. "I'll get it," Richard said grudgingly and left the table. It so happened that the young man was by nature an introvert, and uninvited guests were like a bone in his throat. When Richard opened the door, he was startled. Standing before him was his cousin Oswald. "Richard, hello," he said loudly, entering the flat uninvited. "Oswald?" Richard asked, confused. "Brother, why are you looking at me like that? It's like seeing a ghost." Oswald laughed. "Or are you not happy to see me?" "Of course I am, but..." Richard tried to collect his thoughts. "What are you doing here?" "I decided to move to the city," shrugged his shoulders. "I'm tired of dealing with my own affairs in the village. I want to find a job here, and then a bride." "I see." Richard scratched his head. At that moment, the landlady came out into the corridor. When she saw the guest, she smiled broadly. "Oswald, what a surprise." Madison hugged the young man. "What are you doing here?" "I decided to move to the city," answered the guest. "Oswald, you're just in time. We were just about to have dinner." The girl invited everyone to the table. The evening passed in a relaxed atmosphere. Even Richard, who was not particularly happy about his brother's arrival, got involved in the conversation. Grandpa Travis had caught up with his cow. Oswald finished his story. "Yes, as long as I can remember, Grandpa Travis always had adventures," Richard said. "On the one hand, I love the country," Madison said dreamily. "What's good about it?" Richard wondered. "There's something romantic about it," she smiled enigmatically. The groom looked at his bride with all his eyes. The young man was a city dweller to the core and never understood the romance of the countryside. Nights under the moon, dew on daisies, evening sunsets near the river. A lot, you know. Madison started listing. "Oof," Richard pointed at his fiancée. "And meanwhile, Madison is right," supported Oswald girl. "You can't find that in the city." "All right, brother, it's late," Richard said gruffly. "Where are you staying?" "I'm nowhere." The guest was confused. "What do you mean?" Richard was taken aback. "I thought I'd stay with you for a while." "I'm looking for a job." Oswald shrugged his shoulders. "So to speak, on a kinship basis. Brother, in your village you can come to visit and stay overnight for a few days," Richard grinned. "But in the city you have to give advance notice of your arrival." "Where am I supposed to go now?" Oswald asked. He was disappointed by his brother's inhospitality. "Richard, it's late tonight and Oswald can stay with us," said Madison. "And tomorrow morning we will look for a suitable option for him." "I have one more question for you." Oswald looked at his brother carefully. "When can you pay me back my debt?" "What debt?" The girl was surprised. "I borrowed money from Oswald more than a year ago to develop a program," Richard explained in a disgruntled tone. "What program?" Madison squinted her eyes and stared at her fiancé. "Isn't it the super program you're still writing? Yes? Richard nodded his head. I see, Madison said, confused. The girl was discouraged. Richard had initially lied to her, saying that it was a program commissioned by a large company. In fact, it turns out that he borrowed the money from his brother a year ago. Now, there are two questions: where to get the money to pay back the debt and how to live on. The next morning, Richard woke up in a bad mood. The arrival of his brother has disturbed his mental equilibrium. Spoilt relations with his fiancée last night because of Oswald's long tongue. Richard had a fight with Madison. Tell me, why did you have to lie to me about your super program? The girl was indignant. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole truth, Richard justified himself. How are you going to pay back the debt? Madison didn't back down. I'll sell the program and pay it off. When will you sell it? When I write it, Richard snapped. And if that never happens? The girl asked. Thank you very much. The young man bowed to Madison, then grinned and said, Riley, I always knew you'd be there for me in a time of need. I'm just realistic about things. The girl looked intently into his eyes. There is a debt to be repaid. I'll pay back the money. Richard got angry. When and why will you pay it back? Why are you bothering me? The young man was indignant. Because I don't want to start my family life with lies and debts, Madison replied. Then no one's keeping you, Richard blurted out. The door is open 24 hours a day. And if you're so mercenary, you're on your own from now on. About the door, I'll think about your offer, especially since it's my flat, she said in a serious tone. And about the separate budget, I agree with you completely. From tomorrow, everyone pays for his own food, utilities, and his own wants. Madison got into bed and turned away from her fiancé. You're welcome, Richard muttered. He was hurt that his fiancé hadn't supported him in his hour of need, but instead had sided with his brother. Memories of last night's quarrel made Richard's mood even worse. Suddenly, a sound from the kitchen alerted the young man. Richard listened. Madison was laughing merrily at Oswald's jokes. This was the last thing he needed. Richard stood up quickly and dressed. What's going on here? Richard stood up quickly and dressed. What's going on here? Madison, who had been laughing, turned away from her fiancé. She silently collected the rest of the breakfast and put it in the fridge. Madison, why did you do that? Oswald wondered. And to feed Richard breakfast. Why is your brother armless? Madison asked snidely. Well, I ran to work, or who will support me? The girl walked past Richard without even looking at him. A couple of minutes later, the young man heard the sound of a door slamming shut. Yes, brother, you've caused me a lot of trouble, Richard accused Oswald. I'm sorry, I didn't know you hadn't told me anything about your fiancé. About your duty, the young man said. I'm sorry, Richard mumbled in reply. Well, that's it, Oswald said, getting up from the table. I'm off. Where are you going? Surprised Richard. Where to? To look for a job? I can't sit on your neck. All right then, Richard rejoiced. The sooner Oswald finds a job, the sooner he'll move out. Good luck to you. After breakfast, Richard sat down to write the program. He switched on the computer, but he still couldn't write a single line. The young man's thoughts kept returning to Madison. No doubt he loved his fiancée, but he was hurt by her lack of confidence in his abilities. Toward evening, Madison and Oswald returned home. The girl immediately went into the kitchen to prepare dinner without even looking at Richard. Why are you two together? Richard asked unhappily. He was tormented by jealousy. I met Madison at the entrance and helped her lift the heavy bags, Oswald explained. By the way, brother, could you pick up your fiancée from work? You would go to the shop together and buy groceries, so that the girl would not carry heavy bags. Oswald suggested. We'll sort it out ourselves, Richard muttered. And why are you always meddling in the wrong business? I was just trying to help. Oswald waved his hands. By the way, I have good news. I found a job at a computer firm. Thank God, Richard rejoiced. But that's not all, smiled the guest. I've made a deal for you, so you'll be starting next week too. As what? Richard was stunned. Who's what? Oswald smiled even wider. Software and hardware engineer. You're a computer scientist by God. Did I ask you to do that? Richard asked angrily. Why do you always meddle where you are not asked? I just wanted to help, Oswald explained. Go you know where with your help? Shouted Richard. I am so sick of you. Get out of my flat and out of my life, so that my eyes do not see you. At Richard's screams, a frightened Madison ran out of the kitchen. What's going on in here? Asked the girl. I found a job for Richard, and he started. Oswald began to explain the situation, but Richard interrupted him. I told you to stay out of my life. The anger inside Richard just tore him apart. Brother, you'd better calm down before you have a stroke, Oswald advised in a calm tone, which made Richard even angrier. Richard wanted to attack his brother with his fists, but he was stopped by Madison's shout. Calm down quickly. The girl clenched her fists in anger. Richard, have you lost your mind? He started at first, Richard complained, pouting his lips. You should thank your brother for taking care of you. Madison shamed her fiancé, and you're throwing your fists at him. Don't mind your own business, she said in a quiet, commanding tone. All right, now we'll all go to dinner, and afterwards we'll talk and discuss everything. I'm not going to sit at the same table with him, Richard said in a cranky tone. You can stay hungry. Madison shrugged indifferently. It's up to you. Richard had no choice but to accept his fiancée's proposal. The conversation at dinner flowed smoothly. The young men were reluctant to utter words, each thinking about his own. After dinner, all three sat down in the living room. Now, Richard, it's up to you, of course. But today we have utility bills to pay, Madison said sternly. Following your suggestion from yesterday, we'll split everything in half. The girl held out the receipts to her fiancé. Familiarize yourself with what we owe for, and how much we owe. All bills must be paid by the 25th, she said. Where will I get the money? Richard was surprised. Your problem. Madison shrugged indifferently. But all payments are due on time. Richard, I'm going to tell you something. Just don't shout, carefully began Oswald. When the young man made sure that his brother listened to him attentively, he continued. What prevents you from combining work and writing a program? Do you think it's easy? Richard was indignant. Not easy, agreed the guest. But with your brains you can do it. At least you believe in me, Richard said with a sneer and looked at his fiancée. Don't look at Madison like a wolf, Oswald advised. Understand she is a young girl, she wants a new dress and lipstick. So let her buy it. Richard shrugged his shoulders. Who forbids her? And with what money did you think? The guest looked at his brother carefully. All her salary goes to your needs, while you're pretending to be a great genius. Richard opened his mouth to object, but didn't make a sound. Damn it, Oswald was right. Madison, why did you put up with me for so long? Richard asked, dumbfounded. Long ago, you should have kicked me to speed up, so that I found a job. Because I love you, the girl replied quietly. Richard walked over to the girl and hugged her tightly. Forgive me, please, whispered the young man. My ambition closed my eyes to reality. That's right, Madison said. Tears sprang from her eyes. Has the armor of ambition and arrogance of a great genius cracked? I swear I'll work hard to make sure you have everything you want, Richard vowed and kissed his bride. And I'll see to it, smiled satisfied Oswald. Happy Madison looked at her guest and whispered, Thank you. 3 months passed. Richard and his brother worked in a computer firm. Oswald moved into a rented flat. Madison and her fiancé's life began to slowly return to normal. One evening after work, the girl waited for her beloved from work. Today she had a surprise for him. Madison was pregnant. The girl was finishing cooking dinner. The doorbell rang. Honey, did you forget your keys? Madison asked, opening the door. But it wasn't her fiancé standing in front of her. "Hello, are you Richard's fiancé?" asked a beautiful girl and smiled sweetly. Yes, Madison was confused. "I need to have a serious talk with you," the guest replied and entered the flat. "About what?" "The thing is, Richard and I are in love." Madison was speechless at what she heard. How is that possible? Did her Richard have another girlfriend? But how could that be? After all, her fiancé, he loved her every day when he came home from work. He never once gave her any reason to doubt his fidelity. Yes, Richard is no angel, but to live on two fronts. "Who are you?" Madison asked with difficulty. Her throat was sharply dry, and her tongue refused to listen. "My name is Chris," the girl replied arrogantly. She looked Madison over from head to toe with an appraising gaze. "And I'm Richard's new love." "But how can that be?" The landlady mumbled in confusion. Her stomach began to ache from the stress she'd been under. But Madison didn't notice it. The only thought in her head was that her fiancé had betrayed her. "Why are you surprised?" With a cheeky grin, Chris continued to sneer. "A man like Richard needs a bright, spectacular, and beautiful woman like me, not someone like you." "What's wrong with me?" Madison asked quietly. "Well, let's just say you're too plain for Richard," Chris replied defiantly. "Let's start with your hair. It's a hairstyle that was worn 20 years ago. The color went out of fashion the year before last." The guest shook her head defiantly in defiance. "And your clothes are horrible. How can you dislike yourself so much as to stoop to such a thing?" "Richard never said anything like that. He's always liked everything," the landlady mumbled confusedly. She suddenly realized that she felt a pain in her stomach. She should kick that girl out so Madison could lie down. Once she calms down, her stomach will stop hurting right away. "Of course he won't tell you anything," Chris shrugged. "You were the most convenient option for him." "What are you talking about?" "Madison, don't be silly," she laughed. "You're convenient. You feed the pigeon and put it to bed. What else does a man need to be happy?" "No," Madison suddenly shouted. "You're all lying." "Oh, honey, don't be silly," Chris said cynically. "You must realize that a man like Richard will sooner or later get tired of living with a bland woman. He'll want exoticism and new emotions. So he switched to me. There was a spark between us as soon as we saw each other. But Richard, as an honest man, for 2 months could not respond to my feelings. But his love for me won out." "Shut up, Madison. I know it's unpleasant to hear the truth, but as they say, it's better to know the truth than to live in ignorance." "Get out." The pain twisted Madison. It felt like hot metal was being poured into her stomach. "What's wrong with you?" Chris realized something bad was happening to Madison. The landlady suddenly turned pale and sweat beaded on her face. "Call an ambulance." "What am I going to tell them?" the guest asked in confusion. "I'm pregnant." "What?" Chris looked at her rival in a daze. "But Richard didn't tell me anything about the baby." "He doesn't know anything yet," Madison said quietly. She slid down the wall and lay on the floor. She couldn't take the pain any longer. "An ambulance. I can't lose the baby." "Maybe it's for the best?" Chris asked thoughtfully. "You'll lose the baby, and you and Richard won't have anything to do." "What's going on here?" Suddenly there was a loud male voice. Through the pain, Madison recognized the voice as Oswald's. "I came to talk to her about Richard and me," Chris said. She was talking fast and rambling. Suddenly she felt sick because she was pregnant. "Madison, you're pregnant?" Oswald interjected. "Call an ambulance." Madison asked with all her might and fainted. Madison woke up in the hospital. There was a metal IV stand with a needle inserted into her right arm. The medication was slowly dripping down the tube. "Is there anyone here?" the girl whispered. "Oh, you've come to your senses." An elderly woman who was lying on the next bed came to life. She pressed the nurse call button. A couple of minutes later, a large middle-aged woman entered the room. Despite her fullness, her movements were quick and precise. Tell me, what's wrong with me? Madison asked. Shush, the nurse said with a smile. Tomorrow morning the doctor will come to see you. He will tell you everything. In the meantime, rest. The nurse examined Madison and left the room. After she left, her roommate came over and sat down on a chair next to her. My name is Mrs. Megan, the woman introduced herself. What's yours? Madison. What a rare name these days, the neighbor smiled. You scared the girls last night. Can you tell me if you know what's wrong with my baby? Quietly asked the girl. What I don't know, Mrs. Megan waved her hand. They brought you in last night and put you here. It was awful to look at you. You were covered in IVs and wires. I see, Madison said. What a fiancé you have. The older woman smacked her tongue as she thought of Richard. Madison's heart clenched. In spite of everything, she loved that bastard. Why do you say that? The girl inquired. How was he here worried about you? You have no idea, Mrs. Megan shook her head. I was just seeing my son off when they brought you in by ambulance. Your husband wouldn't leave your side until the nurse chased him away. Otherwise, he'd have gone into surgery with you. The OR? Madison was dizzy from what she'd just heard. So there was something wrong with her baby if she was in surgery. Maybe that's why the nurse left the bad news to the doctor. And before I went to bed, I looked out of the window. Your fiancé was sitting on a bench, waiting for someone from the medical staff to come out and tell him what's wrong with you, the old woman continued to tell me without noticing the slim appearance of her new neighbor. Already close to night, he left. Can you imagine? Why was Richard here all this time? Doesn't he care about me? If he has another woman? Madison replied, confused. Yes. And he's been here since this morning, the older woman continued. Came to check on you. Are they allowed in here? No, but he talked the nurse into it, Mrs. Megan said in a confidential tone. So she let him in for 5 minutes. When he saw you, he fell to his knees in front of you. Forgive me, says Madison. Madison, you fool. If I'd known you were having a baby, I never would have done this. He said that. The girl was surprised. Word for word. Here's a cross for you. The old woman crossed herself. Yes, I believe you, Mrs. Megan. Madison smiled. What's next? He kneels down in front of you, kisses your hand, and cries and cries. And how can he not cry when he's guilty before you? Mrs. Megan wondered. Oswald may love you, but what has he done wrong if it's his fault you lost the baby? What did you say? Madison was stunned. How did I lose the baby? Oh, I'm just rambling on. I'm going for a walk. The older woman quickly got up from her chair and left the room. Mrs. Megan, wait, shouted the girl. But the neighbor didn't even stop. Tears sprang from Madison's eyes. Despite Richard's betrayal, she wanted this child. The girl had dreamed of a child since childhood. At first, she had asked her parents for a brother or sister, but they had stubbornly refused, citing financial difficulties. Madison knew that her parents were lying to her, because their income allowed to give birth and raise at least 2 or even 3 more children. Mom just didn't want to bother with nappies and cradles. She was more satisfied with a quiet life, where she could at any moment pack her things and go on holiday. And her father, who loved his wife madly, indulged her in everything and did not cross her. Then Madison firmly decided that she would have 3 children. And when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. And now her dream has come crashing down. Suddenly, Madison frowned. Why did Mrs. Megan call Oswald her fiancé? Now there were more questions than answers. The girl waited for her neighbor, but she persistently did not return. At that moment, a nurse came in. She deftly gave Madison an injection. All manipulations of the nurse were accompanied by silence. After a couple of minutes, the girl fell asleep. The next morning, when Madison opened her eyes, the elderly neighbor pretended not to notice the girl. Mrs. Megan, talk to me, please, the girl asked quietly. But the woman persisted in reading her book. A couple of minutes later, a doctor accompanied by a nurse entered the room. Hello, Madison. My name is Jonathan. I'm your doctor. How are you feeling? Doctor, what's wrong with my baby? Madison asked her question. Unfortunately, we couldn't save the fetus. The man shook his head. You were bleeding heavily and we had to save you. There was nothing we could do for your baby. Madison couldn't speak, the lump in her throat preventing her from doing so. Madison, I realize that what I'm going to say now will not calm you down. The doctor took the girl's hand. But you're still young. You'll definitely have children in the future. You just need to heal a little now, and everything will be fine. Promise? Madison asked hopefully. I promise, Jonathan answered. After the doctor left, Mrs. Megan sat down next to Madison. I didn't say those things out of spite, she said peacefully. It was just something I said without thinking. Mrs. Megan, you knew from the beginning that I'd lost the baby, didn't you? The girl said with resentment in her voice. And you gave me hope to think that it wasn't so bad. I'd been telling myself that I was going to be a mom. Forgive me, old fool. Tears appeared in the woman's eyes. I wanted to support you, but it didn't work out. You know, I know firsthand what it's like to lose a child. You do? Madison asked interestedly. Yes, after graduating from the Teacher Training Institute, I was sent to a town near Kansas. I felt the happiest because I was on my own. I was finally out of my mother's control. I came to the town, got a job at the school. It was a lot of work, but it didn't scare me. On the contrary, my enthusiasm was bursting. I spent all day at school, organizing the leisure time of the pupils in addition to lessons. Mrs. Megan stopped talking and turned away from the window. Madison was afraid to move so as not to disturb her neighbor's nostalgia. There was a steel mill next to the school. I once had to accompany my students on a field trip to the plant. We were met at the entrance hall by Charles, the honorary metallurgist, who knew the history of the plant like the back of his hand. He led us through the main shop where steel was cooked. The boys were shown the smelting process. You can't imagine the eyes my children looked at it with. Then we were introduced to the best brigade of the plant and its master, Alex. When I saw him, I immediately realized that I was missing. His smile drove me crazy. As it turned out later, our feelings were mutual. The old woman smiled at her memories. 6 months later, we got married. The whole town was celebrating our wedding. It seemed there was no happier couple in the whole world. We always did everything together. We cooked dinner together, cleaned, did the laundry. And when I realized I was pregnant, I thought I'd go crazy with happiness. One day my husband didn't meet me after school. At first I thought that he was delayed at work, so I went to the factory gate. The closer I got, the more anxious I became. There were people standing around the gatehouse. I could tell something was wrong. Mrs. Megan stood up, went to the bedside table and poured herself a glass of water. The woman's hands were shaking. It was obvious that it still hurt her to remember those events. She was rambling, but Madison understood her perfectly. As it turned out, there had been an explosion at the factory, and several people had been hurt. And Alex was killed, Mrs. Megan said. Oh my God, Madison whispered in horror, pressing her palm to her mouth. When I got the news, I blacked out. I woke up in the hospital. That's when my roommate told me all about the explosion at the factory and the dead foreman. The most interesting thing is that she didn't even know that I was the wife of the foreman. You can't imagine the colors in which she described it all. And the cherry on the cake was my child, whom I lost. My neighbor told me about it as if her milk had gone sour in the fridge, in passing, by the way. How I screamed. I was sedated so much that it is impossible to imagine. After I was discharged from the hospital, I immediately wrote a letter of resignation. I packed my things and went back home to my mom. I couldn't live in this town where everything reminded me of my beloved husband and our unborn child. Mrs. Megan, I'm sorry, I was wrong, Madison said guiltily. I'm the one who should be apologizing to you, the neighbor said with a pleading tone in her voice. I acted like that tactless old woman. I'm so ashamed, Madison whispered. It wasn't your fault at all. You just wanted what was best for me, so that I wouldn't have to go through the pain that you did. At that moment, a nurse came into the room. Madison, how are you feeling? She asked. I'm fine. Then go out into the lobby. Why? Madison was surprised. Your fiancé is here to see you. Madison sighed heavily. She had made the decision to break up with Richard. Despite her love for him, she couldn't forgive his betrayal, which had resulted in the loss of her child. Madison slowly stood up and headed for the lobby. It was time to start a new life without lies and deceit. She walked slowly down the corridor, mentally reciting to herself what she had to say to Richard. The only thing that confused her was why her ex-fiancé had come to the hospital to apologize, or, on the contrary, to laugh at her for being such a fool. Going out into the lobby, the girl was dumbfounded. Oswald was standing in front of her. Seeing Madison, the man walked quickly towards her. "Madison, hello," Oswald said. "How are you? How are you feeling? What did the doctors say when you will be discharged?" "Stop," Madison said in an orderly tone. "Not so fast, I don't have time to answer all your questions. I'll start by asking you what you're doing here." "What do you mean?" The young man was taken aback. "I came to check on you. I also brought some fruit." Oswald handed Madison a transparent plastic bag containing oranges and apples. "Thank you," Madison thanked her guest quietly. Take, don't be shy," Oswald smiled. "It's my pleasure to take care of you. I know very well how they feed in hospitals. Besides, you need vitamins now." "That's true," the girl shrugged her shoulders. She nodded her head and pointed to a bench near the window. "Let's go and sit down." "Come on, tell me about it," the young man said, sitting down on the bench next to Madison. "I feel better now," Madison said quietly. "Unfortunately, I lost the baby." The girl was silent. She tried not to cry in front of Oswald. "I know," Oswald lowered his head guiltily. "It was my fault that it happened like that." "Why?" Madison jumped up. "If I hadn't brought Richard into our firm, he wouldn't have met her, and my brother wouldn't have cheated on you." "Oswald, don't blame yourself," Madison took his hand. "It's not your fault. What is to be is not to be avoided. You see, if we're not meant to be with Richard, then so be it." "Do you really think so?" Oswald asked hopefully. "Yes, I believe in signs of fate," Madison confirmed. "So do not worry. Everything that is done, for the best. It's just a shame I lost the baby. I'm getting used to the idea that I'm going to be a mum soon." "Don't worry, honey." The young man took the girl's hands in his. "You will heal and rest a little now, and you will definitely have children in the future." "I hope so," Madison smiled. "Madison, my dear, I've wanted to tell you something for a long time." Oswald looked straight into the girl's eyes. "You don't need Richard. A girl like you deserves more than that." "Oswald, what are you talking about?" Madison asked in a daze. "My darling, my love, you deserve to be loved, carried in his arms," Oswald passionately whispered. "I beg you, forget my foolish brother. Give me a chance to be near you. I love you very much." "Oswald, are you crazy?" Madison tried to pull her hands out of the iron grip of the guest, but he only squeezed them harder, not giving her the opportunity to get free. Suddenly the girl screamed. "You're hurting me." "Darling, I'm sorry, please." The young man, without letting go of her hands, began to kiss them. "Oswald, let me go." But he, as if possessed by an invisible force, did not hear the girl's screams and continued to kiss her hands. Madison began to resist. She hit a bag of fruit that was lying nearby on a bench, causing apples and oranges to scatter on the lobby floor. "What's going on here?" Suddenly, a loud male voice was heard next to them, which sounded like a thunderclap in the silence. Oswald blushed in surprise and let go of Madison with a sudden movement. He looked at the tall, formidable man who had appeared as if out of thin air, eyes wide open. "I came to check on Madison," Oswald said, stammering. "I can see that Jonathan's eyes flashed with lightning. I can also see that the patient doesn't like it. So, young man, your appointment hours are over for today," Jonathan said in a tone that did not tolerate any objections. "But..." Oswald tried to say something to the doctor, but he didn't let him. "Should I call security?" Jonathan asked icily. "I'm leaving," Madison said through gritted teeth. He walked towards the exit, turned round at the door, and said goodbye to the girl. "I'll come and see you tomorrow." "Don't." Madison shouted, but Oswald didn't even turn round. Yes, Madison, what a fiancé you have. Madison's doctor shook his head in disapproval. Madison looked at Jonathan carefully. Who was he to judge her choice? Oswald is not my fiancé, Madison snapped at him. But this young man thinks otherwise, Jonathan said thoughtfully. I don't care what Oswald thinks. Madison walked past the doctor, heading for the room. He's just my ex-fiancé's cousin. Madison, are you forgetting something? Jonathan shouted after her. What, she asked, turning around. This. The doctor deftly picked up an orange from the floor and threw it to Madison. The girl orientated herself and caught the fruit. I don't need it, Madison smiled and tossed the orange back to Jonathan. No, that's no good, the man said in a jokingly menacing tone. He was about to throw the orange back, but the girl quickly walked over to him and took the fruit. My parents taught me not to throw food around. And you're throwing vitamins, by the way, she scolded the doctor. Madison walked over to the bench where the bag was lying, picked it up and began to pick up the fruit. Jonathan looked at her. Why are you looking at me? She said jokingly. Come on, help me. The man bent down and started picking oranges and apples. The two of them quickly picked up everything that was lying on the floor. When the last orange was left on the floor, Madison and Jonathan reached for it at the same time and their fingers touched. The young men jerked their hands sharply away from the fruit as if they had been electrocuted. Madison looked straight into her doctor's eyes. Suddenly she wanted to disappear into the green pool of Jonathan's eyes, but she quickly averted her gaze so as not to cause more trouble. Madison took the fruit and put it in the bag. Thank you, she said in a quiet voice. You're welcome, the man replied in a husky voice. Now go back to your room. You need to rest. Jonathan turned round and went to his office. Madison stared after him for a long time. What just happened? It must be a surge of hormones after losing a child, she thought. She took the bag of fruit and went to her room. Madison, what took you so long? Mrs. Megan asked. I'm waiting for you. I'm exhausted. Why are you waiting for me? Madison was surprised. Then she handed a bag of fruit to her neighbor. Here's a treat for you. Would you like some company? Oh, thank you. The older woman smiled. Why don't you eat it yourself? Your fiancé brought it for you. You've got it mixed up. It's not my fiancé, it's his brother, the girl corrected her neighbor. What brother? Mrs. Megan was taken aback. I heard him say he was your fiancé when they brought you in. And then he was on his knees in that room begging your forgiveness. Oswald apologized to me for getting Richard a job at the firm where he worked. That's where Richard had an affair with this Chris. Now Oswald blames himself for my losing the baby. Wow, the woman grinned. That's how life sometimes twists and turns. Yeah, Madison agreed. At that moment, a nurse entered the room. Madison, did you have a full house today? The nurse said with a smile. Go. Your fiancé is here to see you again. What fiancé? Mrs. Megan asked, squinting her eyes. Why do you have lots of them? The nurse asked. No, just one, Madison said. And it was an ex. The girl didn't know what she should do. What if it's Oswald back? The last thing Madison wanted was to see him. What if Richard had a guilty conscience and decided to visit Madison? What's the point of guessing? We'll have to go out and see. Only Madison was a little apprehensive after the ugly scene Oswald had caused today. She didn't want to see him, much less talk to him. Taking a deep breath, Madison walked into the lobby. Richard was standing near the window, looking in. The girl grinned and felt a moment of déjà vu. Exactly an hour ago, she had walked out to Oswald, who was standing looking through that window. Richard, what are you doing here? The girl asked in a harsh tone. What do you mean? Richard was dumbfounded. He walked quickly to the girl and wanted to hug her, but Madison dodged his embrace. Don't. Madison said firmly. I asked you a question. Madison, what's wrong with you? The young man was taken aback. I came to see you. I just got back from a business trip today. I was urgently sent on company business to another city. Oswald was supposed to tell you. Richard, don't make excuses, the girl stood her ground. I know the truth that Chris came to see me, and she told me everything. Told you what? Richard asked in surprise. You're so good at acting, surprised. Madison grinned. I can't believe how good you are at acting. Madison, can you explain to me in a human way what happened? Richard asked demandingly. Why did Chris come to see you? She told me the truth about you two being together and in love. There must be some mistake. The young man furrowed his eyebrows. Why is that? Madison grinned. Because she and Oswald have been dating for 2 months now and are in a serious relationship. Madison looked at Richard dumbfounded. She was completely confused as to whether Oswald was in a relationship with Chris. Then why had he confessed his love to her today? Madison looked at Richard carefully. You're not confused about anything, are you? She asked with a frown. Madison, do you think I'm an idiot? The young man was indignant. The thing is that on Thursday, when I was in the hospital, Chris came to my house and told me that you were having an affair with her. She asked me to let you go to her. That doesn't make any sense. Richard sat down on the bench. He looked at Madison carefully. If you didn't know anything about me being in the hospital, how did you end up here? Madison decided to find out the whole truth. I came home and you were gone, the young man explained. I called your phone, but you were off the hook. Yes, because I blocked you, the girl confirmed. Why? Don't play dumb? Madison grinned. But you still haven't answered my question. The girl was determined to get to the truth. How did you know I was in the hospital? I came home, and our beloved neighbor, Mrs. Cassandra, told me in all the colors that you were taken away by ambulance. Do you understand? Okay, Madison said. Honey, tell me what happened to you, Richard asked. Nothing. Except that my fiancé is cheating on me, she blurted out. I lost the baby. Stop. The young man tried to realize the meaning of Madison's words. What baby? Ours. But why didn't you tell me you were pregnant before? I was going to tell you that Thursday when I went into the hospital, Madison grinned. Instead, I found out about your affair. How can you not realize that I'm not having an affair with this Chris? Richard raised his voice. Don't yell at me. Madison was indignant. Your brother, by the way, says otherwise, Madison said. He even apologized. That he introduced you to her. Oswald? The young man mumbled confusedly. But he's lying. I would never cheat on you. Why would he do that? Madison cut the young man's speech short. I don't know. Richard suddenly lost his temper. He walked over to Madison and grabbed her by the shoulders. Look, I'm not guilty of anything. I'm hurt. Madison tried to break free of the young man's iron grip. Let me go. Jonathan walked past the lobby at that moment. He took a quick step toward Richard and pulled him away from Madison. What kind of day is this? The doctor looked indignantly at his patient. Madison, is a hospital a place to get into a relationship? I'm sorry, the girl replied, lowering her head. She was embarrassed that Jonathan had witnessed such an ugly scene. It was the second time in one day. What would he think of her now? Young man, the man said in a firm tone, addressing Richard. I urge you to leave the hospital. Otherwise, I'll be forced to call security. But I've come to visit my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, Madison cut in. Especially ex-fiancé, Jonathan added. Any questions, please, after you've been discharged from the hospital. Your fiancé has lost a child. She needs to regain her strength both physically and mentally. Madison, get me off the blacklist, please, Richard asked. Why? So I can at least call you. Richard, there's no need for that, Madison said tiredly. She was exhausted from the fight with Oswald and Richard. Get your things and get out of my flat. I'm going to the hospital. I don't think we need to hurry, Richard said. I'll wait for you and we'll talk about it. You see, I've already made up my mind and talking about it isn't going to change anything, Madison said. and you're just delaying the inevitable." "I'll wait for you," Richard said. He wanted to kiss Madison goodbye, but she wouldn't let him. "I'll wait for you at home," the young man said and left. Jonathan looked at the girl. "What kind of strange suitors do you have?" The doctor grinned. "I'm shocked." Madison walked slowly into the room. She wanted to lie in bed and cover herself so she wouldn't have to see anyone or anything else today. Madison silently walked into the room and got into bed. Mrs. Megan, try as she might, could not get her neighbor to talk. The older woman took great offense at Madison for not saying anything to her. How was the meeting with the next fiancé thought? But the girl didn't care about her neighbor's feelings. She would have to sort out her own. The girl could not sleep for a long time. She couldn't understand which of the two brothers was lying to her, which of them was pursuing his own advantage, and most importantly, what kind. Madison decided to make a confrontation for all three: Richard, Oswald, and Chris. That this girl has a relationship with one of the brothers, there is no doubt. Just whose side is she playing on? It remains to think of such a situation to catch all three together by surprise. The only place where all the conditions match perfectly is the firm where all three work. All the following days, Madison carefully avoided meeting her brothers, although they regularly came to visit the girl. The last thing she wanted to do was talk to them. Madison realized that her love for Richard was just an obsession. At first, she didn't like his advances. Then she dreamed of his future fame as a famous computer programmer. And then the girl felt sorry for the unrecognized genius, because he had worked so hard to write this super program. And when the truth came out that the program was a figment of Richard's dreams, she felt offended that she had been tricked for so long. As they say, everything is for the best, Madison thought. She spent all her free time at the hospital with Jonathan. At first, the attending physician seemed like a serious man who was only interested in medicine. In fact, Jonathan, as he asked to be called, was only 10 years older than her. His range of interests was so broad that Madison couldn't imagine how she could know so much. They spent days and evenings talking, and each time the subject was different. During this time, she learned a lot of new and useful information. And at the same time, Jonathan was not a connoisseur and did not try to be clever. Unlike her ex-fiancé, who at every opportunity let Madison know that she was stupid. The day of the discharge came. Madison couldn't hide her disappointment. "This is it," she sighed sadly as she walked into her doctor's office. "Why are you sighing so sadly?" Jonathan smiled. "I am being discharged today, and it's time to break up." Madison shrugged. "You sound like you're going to another planet." "Madison, why are you so sad?" The man came up to the girl and put his arm around her. "Are you saying that our relationship is over? Can't we continue it outside the hospital?" "Is that what you want?" Madison asked hopefully. "I do," Jonathan answered. "As soon as I saw you, I knew we had to be together." "You do?" The girl's eyes lit up with happiness. Really, Jonathan kissed her cheek, which made Madison blush. She was pleased with the man's advances. "There was one thing I didn't like." "What's that?" Madison frowned. Their relationship hadn't even begun yet, and already there were complaints. "Madison, please deal with your brothers. I don't want them around you all the time. Plus, I'm confessing my love for you." "Don't worry about that," she exhaled. "I have an idea how to get them out." "Which one do you think is lying?" "I don't know," Madison admitted honestly. "What if Richard is telling the truth? And he hasn't cheated on you?" Jonathan asked with concern in his voice. "Would you go back to him?" "No," Madison answered. "The situation had made it clear to me that I hadn't loved Richard for a long time. It was clear to me that I had treated him like a little child." "Why?" Jonathan wondered. "I felt sorry for him, and I treated him like a piece of paper. He sat on my neck for so long and manipulated me. And I was stupid enough to let him do it because I felt sorry for him. How can it be that Richard works so hard, and his program still doesn't appeal to his customers? As it turned out, it was his idea, and no one ever wanted his software." I see Jonathan pulled her tighter against him. "What are your plans for today?" "I want to get all my stuff home first. Take a shower. Madison rested her head on Jonathan's shoulder. And then I want to go to that firm where all three of them work. Why? Why? She grinned. I want to catch them in an uncomfortable situation. That way I'll get them out in the open quicker. I won't let you go there alone. Jonathan was determined. I'm coming with you. I'm just finishing my workday for the day. Great. Madison kissed the man. You'll be a great support. I'm going to go pack. I'll be waiting for you downstairs in the car. Jonathan smiled at her. He was glad he had met her. He was glad that he had met her. It so happened that all the girls he had relationships with did not understand his attitude towards work. After all, Jonathan gave himself to it completely, and the girls were capricious, forcing him to choose between work and them. Jonathan had always chosen work, as it was the only thing he saw the meaning of his life in. It was only now, when Madison came along, that he realized what it was to love and be with this girl all the more. Madison understood him and accepted him for who he was, and now he would do anything to make this fragile girl happy. Walking out of the hospital into the street, Madison breathed a full sigh. How she had missed fresh air all this time. Madison, don't stay out in the cool air too long, or you'll catch a cold. Jonathan shouted. He was standing outside his car waiting for the girl. When he saw Madison, the man opened the car door for her. Please, my princess, the carriage is here, he said. Thank you, my king. Madison smiled back. She was pleased with Jonathan's advances, unlike Richard, who never even gave her a hand when she got off the bus. The gallant Jonathan's manners were on point. Where are we going? The man asked as he got into the car. Home first, Madison replied happily. I want to take a quick shower to wash off all the hospital odors. No hard feelings, okay? Even though I love my job so much, every time I come home from the hospital, I shower and wash my clothes too. I feel like I smell sick. Then go home now, Jonathan commanded. When they entered their flat, the girl's mood had dropped considerably. It was obvious that Richard had never moved out. She picked up her former young man's traveling bag and quickly threw Richard's things into it. Well, that's it, I guess, said a satisfied Madison as she walked around the flat and looked around. She didn't want any little thing to remind her of their former relationship. Jonathan, I'm going to take a shower. Could you put the kettle on? I'm dying for a sip of green tea. As you say, my princess, the man kissed the girl on the cheek and went to the kitchen. An hour later, the young people headed to the firm where the brothers worked. The girl just couldn't wait to look them both in the eyes, as well as to set things straight. When Madison and Jonathan entered the office where the brothers worked, they saw Oswald kissing Chris. What an interesting picture. Madison grinned. And you, girl, I see that you are not bad. You're having an affair with two brothers at once. Madison, what are you doing here? Oswald was confused. Then he looked at Jonathan, and he was instantly angry. And your protector is here. We've come to set things straight, Jonathan said, explaining his presence. Where's Richard? Madison asked. I don't think we can find out the truth without him. I'm here. Richard walked into the office. I was on a call. Madison, hi. You've been discharged? Yeah, today. Madison held out a bag of her ex-fiancé's stuff. Here, this is yours. Did you decide to break up with me after all? Richard sighed sadly. Yes, I realized that you and I are too different, so you and I are no longer on the same path. That's a shame. You're a fool, brother. Oswald grinned wryly. If I were you, I wouldn't let Madison go. I'd fight for her. What's the point? Richard asked indifferently. Believe me, I know that look in Madison's eyes. She's not in love with me anymore. Wait, are you saying Madison is with that right now? Oswald pointed his head at Jonathan. Choose your words, young man, Jonathan warned in a cautionary tone. Or what? Oswald asked defiantly. All right, everybody calm down. Madison looked angrily at those present. Oswald, I want to thank you. For what? Stupefied young man. If it hadn't been for your adventure, I would never have met Jonathan. The girl's eyes lit up with happiness. I would have lived on hopes and promises of a better life. Madison, I can give you an even better one. Oswald began. But he was interrupted by Chris, who screamed hysterically. Honey, what's all this? The girl stomped her foot. First you swore to me in love, saying that you want to marry. And then you actually did? Jesus, Chris, look at yourself. Oswald grinned. I just needed you to come to Madison and introduce yourself as Richard's fiancée. That's all I needed. You used me? Chris squealed. Do you think it's possible to have a serious relationship with someone like you? Oswald grinned. You are only for fun and nothing more. Not like Madison. How is she better than me? Chris looked at her rival with dislike. Everything, Oswald replied. Look at you and her. It is because of women like Madison committed feats. Enough. Madison ordered. I'm not interested in your relations, came out the boss and turned to those present. Oswald, I never want you in my life again. If it weren't for your pregnancy, I would have succeeded, Oswald said angrily. The only thing that would have worked out for you is that Richard and I would have split up, Madison said firmly. But I would never have been with you, that's for sure. I hope that was the last time we see each other. That goes for the three of you. Shall we go? Jonathan asked. He put his arm around Madison's shoulders. Let's go, she smiled at her lover. Suddenly her gaze fell on Richard, who stood like a child abandoned by his mother. He lowered his head and did not know what he should do next. For a moment she felt sorry for her former fiancé, but the girl quickly pulled herself together. After all, Richard was a man who had to become independent. Madison and Jonathan left the office. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. God, I can breathe easy. Madison smiled. Then she kissed Jonathan on the cheek. Where are we going? Let's go to the park and walk, she suggested. That's a great idea. Madison took Jonathan's hand. She was happy to have met him. She saw in him all the qualities of a man she had always dreamed of. In the short time they had known each other, Jonathan had proved himself to be responsible, honest, and wise. He had become a friend to Madison, someone she could confide in. This man would not hesitate to lean on her shoulder in times of need, and he was the only one she was willing to share the family's troubles with. Hello, Virginia. I'm driving right now. Actually, it's dangerous for drivers who are on the highway and distracted by their phones. Maybe they're being indoctrinated by their moms, too. Why shouldn't I drive in the face of danger? I want to be on time. You raised me to be responsible, Jordan said. Mommy, I'm not laughing. I listened to you and I heard you. I'll call you Sunday night, okay? Say hello to your father. Bye, kisses. Ending the call, Jordan couldn't hold back a wide smile, satisfied, slightly patronizing. Mom, she doesn't change, she's methodical, and her Jordan's tenacity in pursuing her goal is exactly what he inherited from her. His deputy, Max, he's been told, refers to him in private as my fanatical boss, and he says it with pride. Employee partners considered Jordan serious, down to earth, dry atom in solving problems, even rigid. No one doubted that was logical. And what else could a village boy from the Archangelsk backwoods, born in the family of a forestry farm driver and a village accountant, be like? And by the age of 35, he had managed to turn into the owner of a large and quite successful wholesale company in St. Petersburg? Jordan traded fish and seafood, supplied stores, restaurants, and small wholesale warehouses in his native village. That's what they called him, Jordan the wholesaler. Jordan had to visit his hometown often. And no amount of busyness would have been an excuse to himself if he hadn't visited his own for a couple of months. It wasn't that he missed the country life, it didn't appeal to him at all. It would be somewhere in the south, on the Mediterranean, or the Adriatic, where the colors are bright, people smiling from the eternal sun. That's where he would live in a village in the summer. And the forestry farm. No, that's enough. Having more or less confidently established himself in St. Petersburg, starting to get on his feet, he immediately began to persuade his parents to move in with him. I'll buy you an apartment not far from me, so that in case of anything to help promptly, he said. I know that you helped us." His father grinned, not without pride. "But I've lived here all my life. Jordan, neighbors, friends, fishing, hunting, mushrooming, all here. I'll find something to do here every day when I retire," Harold said. "Think about it. Can you imagine me in the city? I'm not used to theaters and museums. I'm not interested. There are no friends there. No one to go fishing or to the bathhouse with. I've never lived in an apartment there, and I don't want to start. I need my own house, my own yard to get out. And here's this walled forest, a bathhouse by the woods, which I cut down myself. Am I just going to leave it all like this? I'm running away. You have to live in a house, or it will quickly deteriorate if it stands like a summer house. You've started to earn money. Soon you'll want to have a family. There will be a place to bring the kids on vacation." Harold smiled. "Nicholas, you're funny, you're affectionate." "Not offended at all," said his mother, not interrupting his father and cleverly developing a pause in his words. "Well, who now takes children on vacation in the village? And what modern girl would come here on vacation to feed mosquitoes? Jordan would take them to the south, to the sea, to the exotic, wouldn't he, Jordan?" "Maybe," Jordan said, taking his mother's words as an agreement to move to Peter. "Do you understand me? I'll organize a trip to the south for you too. Take a vacation this summer. Don't waste money, you'll only need it yourself." "We are quite happy with life in the north," Harold objected. "When I get rich, then yes, I'll be happy to go," winked his mother. "But I don't want to move either. Although I miss you very much, but I do not want to. I have a comfort zone here." "Mom, I see that you are aware of the trends of modern psychology?" Jordan laughed. "I've never been retarded," Mom laughed back at him. "We're very young, my father and I. We don't need much help. We manage on our own. When you have children, and you need my help with your grandchildren, then maybe we'll move." "If I'm your wife," Kimberly smiled. Jordan knew his mom too well to insist on anything right now. If she said no, she could change her mind, of course, but only after much thought on her own. And at someone else's request or demand, never. His mother, a small round blonde with a snowy, pretty face everyone imagined at first glance soft and malleable. But those who knew her better would have laughed at such an opinion. Sweet, cozy, she really never raised her voice, did not achieve their hysterics and scandals, and in the most difficult situations always kept calm, which the head of the village administration called Olympic. She had a strong and stubborn character. She masterfully managed to stealthily direct the impulsive father where she intended, and do not limit his freedom in all sorts of male trifles. She was gentle and clever at the same time. I guess they're not born like that anymore, they're just disappearing off the face of the earth. Jordan inherited his mother's quiet stubbornness for a reason. He never gave up hope of convincing his parents. When assertiveness, practicality, and what to hide, a share of luck allowed him to start his own business, and not so slowly increase turnover. He bought a small house near Zelenogorsk, requiring cosmetic repairs, and brought his parents there for a visit. Look what a place. A gorgeous forest, a bay. The Rybatskaya campground is nearby, excellent. The owner, Harold, the same age as my father, a great guy. Repair can be done under himself in any style. We'll order together. We'll think it over only for yourself and order as you like or as it is fashionable now. It's your house. What are we going to do here? You'll soon bring a young mistress into it. There can't be two mistresses in a house, and when they get along so that both of them are comfortable, it's a very rare case, an exception to the rule. Nicholas and I are very proud of you, and we will come to visit you with pleasure. But we have our own house, Kimberly said, as steadfast as a small rock. Sometimes Jordan grew tired of chasing. He called it that out of habit, not just driving, but any business endeavor. Jordan allowed himself to stop for a few minutes of relaxation at the first place he could find. Sometimes he didn't realize why he was attracted to it. What did it matter? All that mattered was the result. Now he skipped Sukhodolskoye Lake and regretted it. But don't come back. But why not? I stopped on the outskirts of some small village at the first gas station. At least I could eat some stupid hot dog and think over the options of a pleasant night's stay. A closer look through the Cozy Apartments app on the way would not hurt now. I got out of the car, breathed in the air. The mixture of gasoline and white grass behind the gas station was a safe distance away. A campfire was burning, a few young, long-legged guys jumping around. Fall, warming up. Let go of the dog, asshole. A gusty voice interrupted Jordan's relaxation. He switched instantly when he sensed danger or any inconvenience to himself. He was too tired now. An indifferent apathy came over him, but he had to return from his cocoon to the sinful earth, albeit reluctantly. "What are you doing here again?" came the lazy response. The cheerleading squeal picked up the same lazy yell. Jordan was involuntarily wary. He didn't like such cheerleaders from his forestry childhood. "Give the dog back," I said. "We'll barbecue your hat, we'll roast it, and we'll roast you too. Only with a different recipe," if you perform, came a threatening voice. Laughter and squeals confirmed the seriousness of intentions. "Not impressed?" cut off the frightened voice. In the circle of light stood a skinny, long-haired, red-headed girl in a short jacket, tight jeans, and rubber boots. Almost a child, but already shapely. Around her, several tall and fit guys backed away from the bright light. She didn't. Just quickly caught and hugged by the neck a shaggy, dirty dog that one of the guys had let loose. "Kimberly, covered in fine. Come back. Let's go home," the well-packed man said mockingly, as if he'd accidentally forgotten to pack his hunting carbine in the trunk and was tossing it from hand to hand in a measured motion. Jordan glanced at the red-headed girl. "Wow, you weren't in much of a hurry," she stated with leftist savvy. The redhead shook her hair and, to the silent disapproval of those around her, turned and walked toward the stout man. Not too hurriedly, but with a dead grip on the withers of the confused dog. "Thank you," the girl said as soon as she stepped into the gas station. "Where can I take you?" Jordan asked almost idly, like a rescue answering machine. The girl was in no danger of being victimized by bullies at this point, and some reasonable detour could be made to take her home, but there was no interest in socializing with her at all. "Strangers and strangers are addressed as you," she reminded him without pretense. Jordan shuddered in surprise and cheered up a little. For the first time that evening and all day, he shook off the weight of strategic thoughts. From the girl came a tangible aroma of stale clothes, 3 kilograms of clay on each boot. What an impoverished noblewoman. "Where shall I take you?" he asked. "Kayla. I'm afraid I'm not expected anywhere." The redhead shrugged her sharp shoulders. "Look, just because you had a fight with Mom and Dad doesn't mean you have to make them put out a bolo. I'm sorry, I'm back on the you again. How old are you?" "Don't. Just this one. That a lady doesn't ask her age." Jordan was surprised, although I wouldn't be surprised by such an answer. "No, I'm fine with that," he said calmly. "A girl. I'm 21, though I'm used to being mistaken for a 15-year-old. I graduated from college with a degree in economics and accounting, like my mom told me to. I was even going to look for a job in my major. Just like my mom said. Let her rest in peace. I feel sorry for her. She just didn't consult me when she married that asshole she trusts more than me. She's a nurse, she works shifts, she's on call a lot. Her new husband is a mechanic at the candy factory." Jordan looked thoughtfully at the red-haired girl. "He's always home in the evenings, and they don't bake cakes at night," Kayla continued. "I warm up dinner for me and him at the same time. He'd grab me by the shoulders and then by the ribbon. Another day, I was lucky to get away with it. The guy took offense, warned me if I didn't get smarter. He'd kick me out of the house." She was quiet for a while. I hesitated, but decided to tell my mom after all. She has the right to know with whom she lives. Then she told me that I don't know anything about gratitude, that I was selfish. She raised me with such labor, and now I'm interfering with her happiness, which she waited for so long. Talking trash about her loving husband? Kayla took a deep breath. Maybe that would be the end of it for now. But she did ask Bill the question. He was quick to answer, "I'm sorry, Charlotte. I didn't mean to upset you, but your daughter is deliberately provoking me, keeping me on my toes, just to keep us apart. Of course, it's not your fault she's grown up like this. You've worked hard to provide for her." Kayla grinned bitterly. There he was, the honorable one. He was without pretension. His mother believed him unconditionally, called me names, demanded I apologize to an offended Bill. I pretended to go to bed, packed my backpack with a couple changes of underwear and my papers and left. The only money I honestly took was my savings from my summer part-time job. Maybe it would have been wise to bring some things, but I couldn't. It would have made it look like I was worse than he was. She glared at Jordan. Are you thinking right now that this is just my cover story to get you off my back and rip you off? I mean, I'm homeless. Or at least to get money for a drink, for example. Well, I've definitely already got that look. Do you have somewhere to go? Or just so vagabonding out of principle and love of art? She smiled sadly. Did you like it? Jordan asked himself, catching the funny thought that for some reason he believed this girl. I'm stupid, of course, but not that stupid, she explained. What's there to like about it? Not unless it was somewhere near warm seas and then in Europe. Jordan listened attentively to Kayla's story. That's until October, she continued. Where did you get this knowledge? You've been to warm seas? No, of course not. I haven't earned it yet. I've just been reading a lot. I want to travel someday. Not as extreme as I am now, of course. Kayla was quiet for a moment. I forgot to ask, where is my point of departure from? Tiva region, Staritsa station. I decided to go to Podporozhye. My father and his new family live there. They have a house. We haven't talked for a long time, but I thought he wouldn't mind taking me in. At least for the first time, until I find some work in St. Petersburg. Everything is more expensive in Moscow, and I have no one there at all. She grinned bitterly. It was a stupid thing to do. I should have found out something beforehand, and I just went like a hedgehog in a fog. Of course, if I'd known my father's number, I would have called him. But I just took a chance. There is a house. My father is not here. He works on a rotational basis in the far north. The only people in the house are his wife and red-headed twin boys. I showed her the documents. She said she believed me. I looked just like my father, and the boys have the same color hair as me. She was calm, no hysterics. She showed me the deeds to the house. All the property is registered to her. She told me that the house was her inheritance, and that they had a fair agreement with my father. He couldn't buy such a place, but he earns a lot of money for his family. And she just raises the kids, gardens, and waits for him. And there's no place for me here. She's not a charity worker. So I'm not coming. I'm going back to my mom's. Kayla sighed. Well, she said it much more politely than I'm saying it for short. I didn't have anything to object at all. She was right. She even left me overnight. She wasn't afraid I'd say something to my husband. In the morning, I just walked to the station. I don't know where I'm going next. I put off the decision until I got to the station, and some freaks on a moped speed past and snatched my backpack with my money, phone, and documents from me. Jordan listened carefully to Kayla's story. I was carrying it not behind my back, but in my hand. For some reason, she continued. It was lucky that the passport was in my jacket pocket. When I showed it to my father's wife, I was too lazy to put it neatly back into my backpack. I can show you. The girl shoved the passport under Jordan's nose with a magician's gesture. Nice to meet you. Kimberly, she introduced herself. Jordan chuckled. Jordan. It was like a Brazilian soap opera. Twice Jordan. That's kind of cool, he grinned. I didn't realize that Bruce Willis watched soap operas, Kimberly said sweetly. Jordan replied. There were tons of them on not too long ago. Mom used to watch them sometimes for recreation. He didn't react to the mention of Bruce Willis. I figured you didn't go to the police so they wouldn't bring you home. You weren't seriously considering vagrancy, were you? She's not a stupid girl, but she's a fool. What do you think your prospects are on the street? Jordan cut himself off abruptly. The girl was clearly not in the right state of mind to indoctrinate and moralize, and he took the tone of a job interview, and that was funny in its own way. No, at least not decent ones, Kimberly said. What am I supposed to do with you? I don't want to turn you in to the police. Leaving you here isn't an option. Do I have to bring the dog home with me? No, it's a 5-spot, the girl explained. I fed her at the same store with sausages on the way to my father's house. She shadowed me, so I took her with me. Do you have any work for me? Unskilled labor would be fine. I can clean and cook quite well. I don't know the cuisines of the world, but my borscht and dumplings are really good. And you'd go to look at a workplace now? Jordan chuckled. Are you sure you're a fool, Kimberly girl? If you're not court scared, Mom was definitely only concerned with her personal life, not your upbringing, if she didn't instill in you that you shouldn't get in the car with strange men. Kimberly smiled. Thank you, Captain Hindsight. I wouldn't get in with just anyone. It's just that not many people care. I didn't expect anyone to stand up for us at all. Not even to listen. What happens when someone helps me out and then listens to me? I think I can trust him. She looked at the gun. Is that a hunting rifle? I can tell the difference. Grandpa hunted. Simple logic. Logical, Jordan smirked. You must be hungry, huh? Some gas station hot dog I could eat, Kimberly admitted. She was quite cozy in the back seat, lying down as if she'd only slept on narrow cots or on long-distance trains all her life. Five, stretching her paws out on the mat, sometimes howled unexpectedly behind Jordan's back, but Kimberly slept as quietly as if she wasn't even there. She was from a normal family, albeit an incomplete one. Not a tramp or a bum, just a girl. Jordan was sure of it. He hadn't grown up at court himself. For 6 months now, he'd been thinking of hiring a housekeeper and putting her in the empty guest house. He didn't like big company in the house, so the guest house was empty. Everything you need to live there, and what you don't have, you can get in the main house. Most likely as an accountant, Kimberly is a rural college graduate. As an au pair, she's a good fit. It is unlikely that the candidates recommended by the housekeeper hiring agency will be fundamentally better. Kimberly, still not fully awake, cleared the air with the edge of her palm. You just keep in mind that this will be the very first job I've ever had, apart from handing out flyers. Kimberly said. And that's not to say that I'm entitled to any understanding or leniency, but that I have to chew everything in detail on a daily basis. And duties weekly, different little things for your own convenience, so that I do not have the slightest in front of my eyes and do not ask stupid questions. The more detailed the instruction, the better the result will be. Are you a sensible girl at times? Jordan snorted. It just seems that way, Kimberly reassured him. I just don't like trouble. Okay, I'm convinced. I'll come up with detailed instructions for you, Jordan assured her. I'll pay you what the market average is. Unless, of course, you disguise your duties. No way. A job's a job. Thank you. Are you really going to help me out? Even if you save me, you won't regret it. I'm responsible, when you really have something to do. For some reason, Jordan expected that now she'd become more animated and start talking nonstop, spilling facts from her life. But she stared silently out the window, and after about 10 minutes, she fell asleep again. How many kilometers did she walk during the past day? Interesting. Kimberly lived and worked for the second month in a bright, almost always empty house near Pittsburgh, surrounded by deep, spacious forest, where she had managed to collect so many mushrooms that she even dried and froze a solid bunch for the winter. Of course, if there were to be a mistress and children here, the duties would become more complicated, but then people would need different qualifications. For now, Kimberly would do just fine. She'd given her employer fair warning that she'd try to change her life at the first opportunity. If he wanted to hire a real, permanent, and reliable housekeeper who would seriously get into the running of his house and garden housekeeping, it certainly wouldn't be Kimberly. But Jordan was liking everything so far. He hadn't picked on anything at all, had never once expressed a shadow of dissatisfaction with the female order. But he wasn't really happy about it either. Good, Jordan said, smiling fluently when he came back from the office or wherever. That's fine. At least she doesn't yell and demand to turn inside out of her own skin for her pennies. You're lucky, at least you have an adequate employer. Her friend Amelie was happy for Kimberly. No sooner had Kimberly agreed to live in Jordan's homestead guest house and run his simple household in the large main house than he immediately gave her a smartphone for work-related purposes, which could be used for personal use as well. Kimberly held out her doubts and sought out a couple of her closest friends on social media, the only ones she wanted to share her journey, adventure, and unexpected employment with. Amelia and Monica were offended that she disappeared without warning, and Paprikala endlessly on the theme, "Hello, dear Cinderella, right you loser sisters," but only for appearances in order. They got tired of it very quickly. And the correspondence on the second day took the form of a usual conversation of old friends from the first grade. After thinking up a safe speech, the girls went to Kimberly's wife and mother. where they found out that she was not wanted. Bill said that winter was coming soon and the daughter herself would materialize on the doorstep as soon as she was cold enough to live on some girlfriend in the country. That's what she and her mother thought, that Kimberly lived somewhere in the neighborhood. But they weren't going to look and check. Kimberly cried quietly through the night, tucked into a shaggy, 5-toed plush flower. Of course, she realized that she hadn't needed her mother much for a long time. But it was one thing to understand, and another to make sure she understood correctly. Oh well, she had a favorite audit professor in college. She was an orphan. Kimberly told her and Emily herself once. Didn't even know who her mother was, who her father was. Childhood on the government payroll. They were very surprised at the time and didn't know why. She's quiet, pretty. Husband, son, daughter, dog, and cat. Nothing happened to her. Nothing bad could happen to Kimberly without her mom's love. Jordan had urged her to make herself known. A mom's a mom. She's not some monster. She'll be looking for her mom by winter anyway, he said. She'll start thinking she'll file a criminal complaint, he said. Kimberly didn't think about it for long. She agreed. Yeah, I'll do that, just a little later. I'm not ready yet, she replied. It wasn't so cold at Jordan's house that she wanted to go back to the registration office. The heating there turned out to be an afterthought. The first time, not yet. Troubled by childhood memories of her mother's friends, Kimberly was only afraid of her host's guests. But his guests were rare. And those that did come and talked more about business and acted like they were at a business meeting, she was ignored, as if she were some kind of janitor. And that was very comforting and gratifying. Kimberly checked the elegant statuettes and fancy decorative candles in the living room over the fireplace every Friday and thought that the owner of the house had obviously counted on some other guests. If he'd bought all this stuff and put it here. It wasn't very well arranged, of course, so she rearranged it more nicely. He doesn't care, but it makes me feel good, Kimberly thought. She was even starting to get worried. Does he have any friends? No, those smiling, smooth-talking, or conversely reserved, wary business associates, but just friends who would call him Jordan and talk to him about something ordinary and interesting only to them. He often arrives over, though. Talking about the ordinary at that time is something few people would want to do, Kimberly reasoned. Talk to you about anything. Does your Jordan, other than your job or purely as a piece of furniture, see you, her friends asked. He rarely does, but I don't feel like furniture, Kimberly answered without thinking. And this Friday, the landlord didn't return calls about the week's grocery shopping. He arrived much later than yesterday, at 3 in the morning, and the car plowed at the same time as he did, as if on cue. Sleek, well-groomed brunette with coral nails on long and thin pearlescent fingers. She should have gone to bed quietly, having finished all her chores, instead of waiting for him like a fool, a complete idiot. She couldn't think of anything but the most common option. Kimberly berated herself for her miscalculation, but even more so for being so unpleasant about a surprise that she actually should be indifferent about the important visitors. Jordan usually called ahead of time and gave some specific orders, and these guests were completely unexpected. She didn't say anything back to Kimberly, just slid a blank stare at the greeting, like the girl with the paddle in the old park. Good. To Kimberly, that meant it was okay to act the same way. She hummed cozily and dissolved into the book. At least she could be sure that no one would bother her in her room until morning. She came home silently, as if she might wake someone there, and prepared to quietly take a bath and go to bed. If the dream hadn't been shaken up by the phone ringing unexpectedly. Kimberly didn't want to pick it up, but he insisted. Kimberly, Deputy Master Max exhaled almost patiently. Well, thank God, at least you are. Are you in your room or somewhere near Mr. Jordan? Sorry for the stupid question. His cell phone is unexpectedly disconnected at this time of day, and I need it now. I'm in my room, Kimberly replied. I know I have no right to ask you anything, especially in the middle of the night. And I wouldn't if it wasn't important. Look, I'm sorry, but there's a problem with the paperwork on the last big shipment. It just came up in the overnight shipment. So we have to do something about it. Please run if you can to the owner's house and hand Jordan's cell phone. You can reset it now and I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I can't explain to Max that Jordan's not alone. Suddenly something really global. Kimberly threw on a long, almost toe-length down jacket over her pajamas. The cocoon she'd bought with her first paycheck dipped her feet into her athletic boots and slipped quietly out the door. The front door of the master's house was, as usual, unlocked. Why, if the gate was locked, there was a panic alarm and video surveillance. Kimberly deliberately stomped rather loudly up the stairs to the second floor, where the master guest bedrooms were, so as not to catch the couple off guard. But it seemed that in those Indian Pathfinder boots she was never heard. There was a conversation going on outside the door, quite loud and lively for the time of night. "Where do you see the caprice, Jordan?" came a woman's voice. It was the usual request of a girl with a sense of dignity. "I'm not a prude, and I understand men's physiological needs, as you've already seen. But the times of slave owners with concubines or barinas with serf girls are a little past. Since you're so conscientious and socially responsible that you can't fire her on the street, write this girl a perfect reference and pay for some, I don't know, VIP job search package through a domestic staffing agency. I have absolutely nothing personal towards her. May she have better luck elsewhere. I assure you, she doesn't care who she continues her career with. Let anyone's husband or boyfriend sleep with her, but not mine personally. No one's ever complained that I'm not making my position clear." Listen, Jordan's voice was calm, tired. "I have no desire to offend you or Kimberly. I wonder if you're comparing us." A woman's voice responded with a gentle, lazy sneer. But the conversation was not destined to continue. Kimberly's cell phone rang in her down jacket pocket. It was Max, whom she'd forgotten about while standing under the door. She realized immediately that she was still standing there and started pounding on the door with her fist. And then she raised her voice. "Max has an emergency." Jordan opened the door almost immediately and slipped through the door as quickly as he could to keep her from looking into his bedroom. Kimberly slowly turned around and headed back out without waiting for comment. Ameli's friend was right. Things were going suspiciously well. It couldn't last. You can't get used to a good thing so it won't be so frustrating when it's over. Kimberly was the most sensible and practical of all the women, their friends and acquaintances. It pissed off the girls on the course with her complete lack of desire for romance, and few wanted to be friends with her. Kimberly shrugged and said everyone's different. And Ameli's practicality didn't get in the way at all. On the contrary, it's good to have such an unflappable person around. I must wait until morning sometime and call her, to advise her on where to go next. A dreary apathy came over Kimberly, endless, dragging like rubber. I wish I could cry. She'd slept very little. She didn't even know if she was dreaming. She just fell out of reality sometimes, and then came back in again. At 8 o'clock in the morning, she got out of bed and made coffee on the small gas stove. Settling down at the narrow table with a cup, she looked around for her phone to dial. Only now did she remember that Jordan had her cell phone. "I've lost my mind," Kimberly complained confusedly to Piglet, who was lying at her feet with a nonchalant face. It was as if their life and living had been clearly and successfully determined once and for all. "You have me stupid." Kimberly was very supportive of short conversations with the dog, nothing superfluous, just the gist of the question. The dog's answers can be figured out by herself. It's dog nonsense, of course, but it helps to look at the problem calmly and find a solution. "Don't get too involved in this therapy," Amelie advised Kimberly almost seriously. "It's better to make some acquaintances among people." That's easy for her to say. If she had a regular job, it would be different. But here it's like living in a nature reserve, comfortable, quiet, but completely deserted. Jordan, as it turned out, had never had any housekeepers or domestic helpers before. At least he'd had a cook come in. "Kimberly, I'm not really a foodie," Jordan explained carefully, neither offended nor angry at the question. "You see, I often come home at night, have business lunches during the day, and go to a restaurant with my partners in the evening. Quite often have to dine out. For other occasions, there is delivery. Now you're cooking for yourself. You're treating me. It's very good, by the way. Especially the beef chowders. So I'm not being greedy. I just didn't feel the need without servants. I started to think about cleanliness and order. Hiring you solved the problem. Everyone says it's much more cozy. I think so myself. Actually, to complain about work and life would be the height of insolence. My wife used to think this kind of work was something humiliating. One word for it, in a word, a servant. The creators of TV series distort reality for girls. Jordan smirked, noticing her first confusion and tension. You're just like any other employee, except you're not an office worker, not a salesman. I'm house staff for now. If you don't like it at home, we'll find you something else. I've got plenty of openings. Kimberly was embarrassed to ask why he was helping her. Even the impeccably logical Amelie couldn't see any real reason. The girls unanimously dismissed the love story at once. Of course, it was the most tempting, but it wouldn't work for us, Kimberly said with a confident snicker. Jordan hadn't shown any interest in me as a girl. I'm more affectionate with my dog, Peter, than he is with me. Jordan didn't show the slightest hint of interest in my girlfriends, even in jest. The usual benevolent employer who is not too interested in the employee's personality, as long as her work suits her. Meals, he explained, were on him. It turns out that many people practice this for domestic staff. He gave me a card to buy groceries and household items. Controlled expenses for a week, then stopped. Jordan said, "You can spend more. If you really think you need to buy something for the house. Don't bug me about the little things, but for the big purchases, please consult me. You know, if you need a new washing machine or something." Kimberly hadn't heard a single nag from him. Now she honestly tried to remember again. Not a single one. It's unlikely she's that flawless at her job. It's probably just that Jordan's spoiled and unpretentious. Look, there's only one viable theory, Amelie concluded. The man probably came from a simple family and worked his way up. He has a simple outlook on life. Why not help the girl if it costs him nothing? It's good for the bottom line. Now Jordan's going to fire her, most likely. First of all, his friend didn't like her. Secondly, there was eavesdropping at the door, albeit accidentally, but still eavesdropping. No sooner had Kimberly crouched on the floor next to Pyrochka and thought about her next steps in life, covering the dog's head with her hands, than the doorbell rang briefly. "Come in." "Is it open?" Kimberly answered, trying to sound calm. Jordan entered, placing her cell phone on the table. "Here, I'll give it back. Max and I made you uncomfortable. It's rare, but it happens sometimes. If it happens again, you'll understand. It's a work thing. I never turn my phone off at night. But sometimes it has a life of its own, so it went off at the wrong time. Anyway, I'm sorry." "I'm sorry too," Kimberly heard her own voice. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop on your conversation. I was just confused when I realized it was about me. If you need me, I'll leave without a problem. Don't keep me here out of pity. You've been so helpful. My friends didn't believe me at first, that this could just happen. I'm okay with my citizenship, my registration, and my specialty, so I won't be lost. There are people in much worse situations." I don't know what Kimberly was imagining, but I don't want to get into it, Jordan said tiredly, even grimly. Jordan said, "I just thought I had found someone for a serious relationship. But it turns out I was just imagining things. And you just work your ass off and keep it simple." Kimberly had noticed that he had a habit of fiddling with various objects in his hands, his phone, glasses, a pen, when he was thinking about something. Now he picked up a thin sketchbook from the dining room table. The kind they usually buy for first graders. He opened it, leafed through it, and perked up. "Oh, this is drawn with a regular pencil. Is that how you know how to do it? And you don't say anything? We did not ask about your hobbies?" He blurted out. The first thing that came to mind. The 5 is like a living person. And her character is conveyed. I look so good only after a vacation, when I am on the beach in the Dominican Republic. Disconnect from everything. Max is handsome and a crook. What's it really like? The chief accountant, but once you've seen him, it's like you've known him your whole life. Listen, you have a talent. That's me, no kidding. For the first time, Kimberly realized the real meaning of the phrase, almost falling through the cracks. She was quite decent at taking criticism and complaints, did not go after words and quarrels, but she was not used to praise and was lost, as if on an alien planet. It's her own fault, she thought, scattering her personal belongings around as if intent on being found. Of course, if Jordan were more curious, he'd be interested. There's no telling what could be in there. Just because she doesn't have her own property doesn't mean she can't have her own secrets. And he sees everything around here as his. And in his position, that's normal, I guess. Jordan's casual voice brought her back to earth from her world of thought. I went to the central warehouse, then to the office, and the guests took a cab. And don't worry, it's unlikely you'll see any more of them here. See you tonight. He nodded and left. Five immediately took a deep breath. Kimberly exhaled loudly and was surprised to catch herself feeling happy. Arrogant, haughty Sabrina had imagined in vain that she'd found someone she could twirl around so easily. Jordan said, "She'll have to start looking again. She won't be alone for long. She's too pretty. I'd like to paint someone in some ancient Roman outfit and against a backdrop of rapeseed hills." Until recently, Jordan had hardly ever wondered whether he was lucky or unlucky in his personal life. It hadn't seemed like anything important at all. It'll all catch up later. It's never too late to catch up, he thought. There were always some more important things to do, requiring full immersion and dedication. So there wasn't enough resource for a full-fledged relationship. He was squeamish about professional women. The most expensive escort girls for him were no different from those girls who sit with truckers for one flight. Max tried to change the chief's mind, wanting to involve him in his favorite leisure activity. But he got tired and abandoned his idea. Of course, Jordan had had resort romances. Any of them was pleasant to remember, and he didn't want to continue when the vacation relaxation ended. Max's envy. The boss was a success with spectacular, wealthy and self-sufficient girls, whose lives were too rich and interesting in themselves to be locked in the search for a promising permanent man. In such relationships, no one suffers. They are just for fun and the joy of living. Jordan was happy with his own way of life. If only his parents didn't think he was living wrong and didn't remind him of it. Even his always understanding mother. As soon as the clock struck your 30th birthday, the situation began to change insidiously. Slowly but inexorably. Even yesterday, unconditionally proud of her son, who achieved a lot on his own because he was not distracted by nonsense. And suddenly declared that all this is not too valuable, if for no one, as for no one. Mom, after all, you and your father have a house, 2 cars, you've started to see the world, and I look at you and I'm happy that I was able to provide you with a normal life. It's all great, Jordan. We're proud and we enjoy it. But without all of that, we'd still be doing fine. And seeing you happy is the most important thing to Nicholas and I. Jordan said. Helpful, but you don't look unhappy. Do you agree? He smiled complacently. I know my business and I love my parents' house. I have a place to come. I have a close friend. Yes, just Alex, but I don't need more, you know me. I haven't met someone I want to be around every day. I can't get married just because the time is right, especially since no one gets married as early as they did 30 years ago. Yes, I understand Virginia sighed, feigning marital sadness. Or rather, it was easier for Jordan to think she was faking something. One day he overheard his parents talking and realized that they were quite seriously worried. Nicholas, it's already occurring to me that Jordan still remembers Naomi, which is why he can't find someone else. It happens sometimes. Remember my great-uncle Bill? A classmate of his once didn't wait for him to get out of the army. To other people, it's such bullshit, childish love. He died a childless bachelor. Well, while he was young, he had his perks. But when he got old, he became untouchable. It's depressing. He was starting to worry more and more that Jordan might be like that. And you've given yourself something to worry about, and you brought Uncle Bill into it. Jordan's not like him at all, is he? Not at all. He doesn't remember Naomi from a long time ago. He's making money. He's making a lot of money. He's got a couple years to go. That's normal for a guy. What did he see? While he was setting up his business. One thing he's seen, after a while of partying, he'll want a family. I'd like a grandson or a granddaughter myself, if it wasn't named Benjamin. Jordan felt guilty, even though he knew it wasn't his fault. He'd made his mother worry, even though he didn't want to. It was a stupid story. Is Dad right? Naomi. He hasn't thought about her in a couple years. She faded into oblivion and got lost. Naomi was his childhood classmate's girlfriend, really like the legendary Uncle Bill, the only perpetual bachelor in Mom's large family. Jordan said. Naomi came to their school in 3rd grade, Her mother had divorced her husband and returned with her daughter to her parents' home from another lumber mill town. The girls were mostly tough and boisterous and perky. They were freezing at their desks, giggling and whispering. When the teacher announced, "This is Naomi Woods, she'll be studying with us," Naomi was graceful, somehow very quiet and really light in the truest sense, with soft long hair and big blue eyes. A princess from a fairy tale, the most corny princess, just a paragon. Jordan was an excellent student, but not some nerd, but an athlete and a recognized leader in the class. That day his roommate had the flu, and the new girl was seated next to Jordan. He didn't say or do anything special. But from that day on, they became friends, and were soon seen as inseparable, a couple. Sometimes girls who are beautiful as children grow into the most ordinary girls. But Naomi was not one of them. She grew up to be a real beauty. The most ordinary t-shirts from the local market looked like those from an expensive boutique. At least that's how she seemed to everyone around her at the time. None of the girls even challenged her superiority. It was considered a useless thing, and she was so easy, harmless, and charming that she had no enemies. And it was not interesting to gossip about her. For a township beauty, that was very strange. Naomi, Tiffany's mother, was friends with Jordan and her mother and did not hide her joy that her daughter had such a serious, reliable fiancé. On top of being an athlete and handsome Jordan. But Mom did not know whether to be happy. The girl was very bright. But she doesn't have a lot of whimsy. "I can't find anything to fault in your Naomi. And this is very suspicious," she laughed, though she was not quite joking. The chief accountant of the timber processing plant knew all the local manners very well. Evil gossip from boredom, stupid connections from the same boredom. Naomi was different, as if she hadn't grown up here. She had no special talents, except for her natural appearance. They finished high school. Naomi had little interest in her studies. She was always an average student. She didn't seem to have any big career ambitions, so she just went to hairdressing college closer to home. Eyes glowing. Pretty and outgoing. She has great taste, and such a master is always more willing to go to the clientele than to some old, approved her choice of her mother. She wouldn't get lost in New York either. Jordan went to New York and immediately entered the university with a military department, as planned in the 9th grade. At the General Family Council, it was seriously discussed that he would finish his studies, find a job, establish himself in New York, and then take Naomi. Tiffany, Naomi's mother, was very worried about whether Jordan in New York will not find another, and constantly sent to the House Collins to keep abreast of personal life. She liked to anticipate everything. Beauty is beauty, but there will always be someone even brighter. The university is probably full of girls who grew up in urban families, theaters and museums, with whom Jordan may seem more interesting, shared Tiffany with her daughter, but immediately encouraged her not to get upset. It's okay. You just have to show that you're loyal and decent. That's rare nowadays, especially with your looks. They marry that kind of guy. Jordan's going to do great things in life. You don't have to be a fortune teller. He'll dress you up and show you the world. Girls are young, foolish, and throw good guys away. They think there'll be plenty of them, but there really won't be, her mother insinuated, looking very convincing. Naomi's wait for Jordan was flawless. It was like she wasn't interested in other guys at all. Serious girl. I didn't expect her to be. Nicholas complimented her once. You know, Nick, if she went to a big city and acted like that, that would be class. But here, and who to look at, who to choose from. Guys who want to make it, they leave. Well, I didn't leave once, Nicholas objected. We still had a different upbringing. Tiffany diplomatically justified her husband, who was already regretting having touched on the slippery subject. And she quickly turned the conversation to the topic she had chosen about Naomi. And my future daughter-in-law doesn't even need to look for anyone. She already has a ready and responsible Jordan. All she has to do is just sweep the less than ideal candidates aside. You're going to be a nasty mother-in-law, aren't you? Her husband raised his eyebrows with a sly smile. Am I a good mother-in-law? Tiffany cut him off with a joking threat and waved a piece of food in front of his nose. And she laughed. And whoever doubts it will be bad. Vacation? Jordan had always come home for the first 2 years, but on weekends and short holidays, Naomi had traveled to New York to see him whenever possible. He was already struggling to balance school and work. And Naomi did banquet, wedding hairstyles at home, and she had much more free time. Conductors of trains Boston, New York quickly remembered the fragile, airy blonde, with which followed on the road voluminous bags, bulks with home-made preparations, cabbage and especially pickled and salted mushrooms, which are so fond of her boyfriend. These trips were interesting, and had been from the beginning, when she and Jordan spent evenings together. But they became even more interesting a year and a half later, when Jordan began to make friends and acquaintances in New York, with whom they could spend exciting time. Jordan made a friend, Noah, who had a knack for beautifully organizing anything. He knew the city down to the last detail because 3 generations of his ancestors had lived here. But his father had recently been transferred to some important position in Washington. And Noah and his mother preferred to stay in New York at least until Noah graduated. There was no rush. Naomi quickly noticed that her Jordan was copying Noah's habits, the way he behaved with people. Jordan covered all ideas on the fly and often looked even more winning than his friend. But the difference was that too much of his time was spent earning money, and he still had a lot less money than Noah. And it would take a very, very long time for him to at least equal Noah's opportunities. Noah had no immediate problems at all. His father's new position in Washington offered his son many prospects. Noah swam in opportunity like a fish in clear water. And he didn't have a steady girlfriend, much to Naomi's surprise. Noah had said so at his birthday party when he brought Naomi to a stylish corner of his father's garden, copying an Italian patio. She's not here yet. But what if she is you? Why would the uninitiated want any extra details? Relationships are born spontaneously. Close souls find and get to know each other. Naomi briefly thought and decided that she was definitely her, and left with Noah to Washington, having previously made a discreet legal marriage. In confirmation of the marriage, Tiffany, Naomi's mother, later modestly showed interested acquaintances a photo with a sign of the registry office of one of the central districts of New York. In the background, in the foreground, a fragile bride in a flowing silver blue dress is held under the elbow by a masculine, confident groom. It was a beautiful wedding, not for relatives eager to party at someone else's expense, but just for themselves. No awkward kinship invasions. Just a fairy tale for 2 and a honeymoon in Cancun, and then also on the island of Kauai and Maui. The beach pics weren't some disgrace either, but classy and beautiful. From a talented and expensive photographer. In all the photos, Noah was smiling broadly, smugly, triumphantly, and Naomi was posing as a gentle fairy. Children's lives are children's lives, Tiffany said meekly and judiciously, standing on the doorstep of the Nicholas home, the nannies. And I'm so sorry we won't rejoice, but we shall remain friends. Come on in, Tiffany, why the show for the neighbors? Ashley replied. Tiffany carefully, but with poorly concealed pride, slipped the pictures to her friend. The guys emailed the stories to me, and I thought I'd print them out for my scrapbook. Isn't she worse than Lady Di? Almost indifferently, without mocking, Ashley said, glancing at the beautiful pictures, a crown prince and a glamorous pussycat. Tiffany, what would you like me to say? I'm glad everything happened now, that my son and your daughter didn't have time to get married and have a baby. Jordan's illness was physically hard and agonizing, long and tiring. The medical profession would say he had a chronic illness. He himself never said a bad word about his frustrated other half, nor would he allow anyone to say a bad word about him. And he would not dare to just quietly go through all this and no longer have any relationship that pretends to be close and touching. Not out of principle, not on purpose. It just happened by itself. An invisible armor grew. He didn't make friends either, only useful business acquaintances. His only friend was his classmate Alex, a bookworm and part-time snowboarder and extreme mountaineer. As soon as he unexpectedly broke up with Sabrina, things suddenly went great. Clearly the events are unrelated, but it's funny. He's never liked the stupid saying about the woman with the wagon, but it fits his and Sabrina's relationship perfectly. As Alex says, secret and stubborn cause and effect. In fact, you should thank your girlfriend that everything turned out so well for you, dear Chief Max said confidentially. He was determined to develop his thought, but the chief was not inclined to do so. And let's make a deal. You will not call my wife the chosen one. I do not call so constantly changing secretaries of your administrative department. You're not a born deputy general with a hereditary title either. Almost 6 months have passed, April has come, and spring is already tangible in coastal resorts. Pyotorochka found out on a short walk that they have hog game hunters in their neighbors. The girls themselves, if Kimberly was to be believed, didn't want to eat any downed wild birds, but the hunters and their four-legged companions didn't interact smoothly. Big and shaggy five frolicked in the company of elegant and expensive hunting dogs, prize winners and champions of all kinds of exhibitions. She turned out to be completely non-aggressive and very friendly. "My puppy has grown so much," Kimberly laughed. Each of the nearest neighbors, whom Jordan had never really known before, because he had no time to get to know them, now had a pencil portrait of a dog with children over the fireplace, or in a cozy corner of the bedroom, or a dog with his wife and children, or a dog with his beloved, respected owner in his office, against a backdrop of racks of books or a stuffed grouse, or portraits of all the family dogs and cats without wife and children, and in any combination desired. Because at home, Jordan's ruler was Kimberly Chigarin, an aspiring graphic artist who just lacked a lot of theoretical knowledge so far. So she was still studying and at the same time working at a job that did not interfere with her studies. Kimberly began to draw avidly when the art expert, who agreed to look at her work, dug up from somewhere, and at the request of the chief obligingly, the Max, discreetly approved. Fresh, original. "Where did you study?" "Accounting college." "It happens, as much as you want," authoritatively hummed the maitre d'. "A vocation. Now it is necessary to study." After giving her detailed recommendations, the expert and the master went to the greenhouse. There, among citrus trees, Jordan had a cozy corner where he sometimes treated his guests with cognac or whiskey. Kimberly went to her cabin, quietly turned the key in the lock, sat by the window, and suddenly cried silently. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been so stupidly upset. It must have been back in high school. The tears were light, not bitter, not even stinging her eyes. If Mom could hear what the professor, the gallery owner, was saying now. There's no reason for him to lie. He might well have hinted to the ruler of the house to improve herself better in the art of wet cleaning, or try to get a job as an assistant primary accountant, since she has a specialty. Kimberly thought. The memory brought back to mind the conversation with her mom before the high school prom. "Kimberly, I'll say it again, and I won't say it again. Yes, while I feed and clothe you, I will decide where you should go to school. That's not fair. It's my life. You're not going to feed me for the rest of my life and then have me live and suffer through a job I don't like you. My favorite job is the one that allowed me to raise you. So don't get smart. You all think you're smarter than your mothers at this age. Don't look at me like you have a wicked witch for a mother. If you had a rich daddy who was willing to support you and give you a head start in life, it would be different. You'd think I'd feel sorry for you. Then you can do whatever fine arts you want. You're a nurse's daughter, a divorcee with a penniless alimony check. You need a profession that will always feed you. Accountants are needed everywhere. They start making good money pretty quickly. They don't have night shifts and wash old lady patients. Holly, my classmate, works remotely, running several small firms. Nice thing, a cat on your lap and no annoying bossy faces. You'd think she'd be a star in the sky. She's a straight-A student, just like me. Kimberly, the daughter of Vaznetsov and Rapin. There's only a few of them. Nobody needs a painter from the word thin. And accountants of average level will find their stable job. Here you will be lucky to marry well. And then do what you want, if your husband will agree to provide for you. Until then, it's just like I said. Kimberly thought, I wonder how Mom is doing now, as if she never had a daughter. After a month of living near Pittsburgh, Kimberly asked Amelie to let her mother know where she was and how she was doing. Amelie told her briefly in general terms that not all is well. Kimberly works as an au pair with room and board. The pay is good. Just before New Year's Eve, Kimberly plucked up the courage to call her mom. Happy New Year, Mommy. Happy and healthy. You're doing fine. You're not on call at home for New Year's Eve. Thank you, my daughter. Happy New Year. Bill and I had some guests over. I'm not really comfortable socializing. Why don't we call again the day after tomorrow? Okay, Kimberly agreed, knowing she wouldn't call back the day after tomorrow. If anything, I call from my number. It's my regular number, she said. Yeah, Happy New Year. Mom quickly said goodbye, hurrying back to her interesting conversations. Kimberly had a strange New Year's Eve, but not a bad one. Jordan had gone to stay with his parents somewhere in the northern village. Kimberly was silently surprised that they didn't want to come to New Year's Eve Pittsburgh themselves, but didn't say anything. As they drove away, Jordan asked what his housekeeper was going to do on New Year's Eve. Wouldn't she be scared on her own? With a fence like that and an alarm system like that, of course not. I once already spent New Year's Eve alone, when my mother had to suddenly replace a sick colleague on New Year's Eve. My girlfriends had left. I didn't have time to make arrangements with anyone. It was nothing special to meet. That's true. But it's kind of sad, Jordan remarked. I'll let you invite some of your girlfriends onto your turf. Kimberly invited Monica. Emily got a boyfriend. It was a big deal. She was invited to spend New Year's Eve with his family. Monica asked her father for a train ticket to Pittsburgh as a gift, and spent the holiday with a friend. All morning and afternoon on December 31st, the girls walked around the city, and by evening came to feast in the same house. You got a cozy place here? Monica cheerfully approved. And in general romance, artistic taste to transform any old lady guard. Who's that? She looked at the women and pencil drawings and became interested in Max's portrait. That's Jordan's chief deputy. A womanizer and a slippery character, Monica said confidently. Dodgy, smart, Kimberly agreed. Aha, it's true. My friend is a witch. I wish she was, but she's not, unfortunately. It's just a talent you have. I've always said that, in case you remember. Who's that character that looks like Luke Evans? Monica asked, pointing to the portrait. That's Jordan, the owner of the manor, Kimberly replied. Ha, Monica said. That short comment meant that she liked the person of the opposite sex. Now I'm wondering if I should run away from home to be rescued by a gentleman like that. Monica, that's not funny, Kimberly countered. It wasn't until I woke up here this morning that I realized what could have happened, and how lucky I was that Jordan was there. So I wouldn't recommend running away. Unreliable lottery, Kimberly said. Come on, you're being a little too serious. Running away is definitely not my thing. I like comfort. And I'm a coward, Monica said. And your boss is really cute. He has a busy personal life, Kimberly said. Because I don't care about his personal life. I won't gossip about him. He's polite. His demands are impossible. He pays well for his work. Even though I'm inexperienced, he brought in art critics to evaluate my sketches. It's already too good, don't you agree? After studying to be an accountant and after my mom's bankruptcy. They were silent for a while, meaningfully looking at the decoration of the house. Wow, New Year's Eve, and this conversation seemed like yesterday, and it's already April, Monica said. Kimberly worked weekends, took regular painting and drawing lessons, and was passionate about other aspects of her life. In general, she gave very little thought to it. But on the first really warm day, when it was clear that winter wasn't coming back, Jordan knocked on the cabin in the evening and asked her a puzzling question. Why didn't you remind me? You've been working for me for over 6 months. You should be on vacation by now. 2 weeks. Everything's blooming in the south. Go on a plein air painting trip somewhere. What's it called? Think before tomorrow, what date do you want to go on vacation? We'll agree tonight. He's withdrawn today and left with a really tired gait. It's easy for him to talk about the South. Kimberly had no idea where to go to get enough money for the winter and where it would be nice and not too crowded. She'd even managed to save some money after she'd paid her tuition, because she didn't have to pay for food and lodging. She'd never been farther than her hometown, except for a school field trip to Washington, D.C., after 9th grade. And she always wanted to travel when she dared to dream and imagine her life was going well. Those dreams always involved traveling, having to be honest with her boss that she needed advice. She never got to ask Jordan about the delights of the South. The next day he came home. Unexpectedly early, at 7 o'clock in the evening, he suddenly knocked on the door of the cabin and asked, "May I sit down here, have a talk?" Kimberly was confused by his different appearance and silently pointed to a chair. Kimberly, would you understand if your vacation had to be pushed back a little? Jordan said. No problem at all, Kimberly admitted. I didn't realize I was entitled to one. Not if you hadn't suggested it. You're on the payroll, Jordan reminded her tiredly. We have to do something about your legal illiteracy. We will, Kimberly said. We'll do it later. Do you need help now? My parents are coming to visit. Do you want them to feel comfortable while I work? Kimberly nodded. And for some reason she pictured Naomi's squeamish face just a little from the side, and a tenacious, finicky gaze watching her every move. That is to say, act casual, so good-natured, the boss advised, as if he'd read her thoughts on her face. You just imagine someone else, not my parents. They lived their whole life in the forestry farm. Ordinary good people from the provinces, without stupid shouting ponchos. My father developed heart problems. Only now it turns out he'd had the alarm bells before. But he didn't tell anyone. He thought it would settle down somehow, but it didn't. They've been recommended a good specialist. I'll arrange it all here. And my dad needs some positive vibes right now. Who knows how long he has left? It's scary to say, but with his diagnosis, it's best not to be self-delusional. My request may seem strange and absurd to you, Jordan continued. You can say no, I understand. My dad and mom really want me to get married. My mom's openly pecking at me already. My father is more silent out of male solidarity, but in recent years he's also worried, according to my mom. If you agree to play along, I'll introduce you as my fiancé, Jordan continued. It will make them so happy that such joy will help them through life's difficulties. Make a lot of things seem like nothing. Don't say no right away. Think about it. It's important to me. I would never have asked for anything beyond your job description if it weren't for these circumstances. Jordan was tensely silent, waiting. Kimberly realized that the ball was in her court, and she had to answer now and in a straightforward manner. I have to concentrate to get my point across, she excused herself. I see your point. Lying for the greater good, after all. But the first objection. What do we do next? All right, you and I will play bride and groom. Father will be pleased. But there's still no wedding. And we don't know when it'll happen. Making up a separation, even a peaceful one. He'll be even more upset by such hopes. It's not good for him. You're going to have to really look for a real bride to fix this. And you can't always find one quickly. You know better than me. To the first objection, I'm used to dealing with problems as they come, Jordan said. As they say, if we're scared, we'll be scared. The course of events can draw further strategy. Right now, I just want to give my father and mother the strength to live. The second objection is that I'm not a good candidate, Kimberly continued. You're a wealthy man, Jordan. And I'm not the bride of a wealthy man. Your parents probably envision a girl from a so-called good family, if not a businesswoman. You can't say that about me. You, with all your intelligence, can just not understand it, do not see the obvious signs, but your mom will. This isn't business. It takes a whole different kind of instinct. Jordan's eyebrows went up in surprise, and for the first time that evening he grinned confusedly. That's the depths of psychology. I like your thoughtful approach to the task. And now I have more and more confidence that you can do it, and my parents will really like you. Well, there's all kinds of actresses, Kimberly said with a final argument. Not all stars are high paid. A lot of people need roles and will play Jacqueline Kennedy if they have to. Dad and Mom would be scared of Jacqueline Kennedy, Jordan said tiredly. They'd love a girl like you. I'm not even going to explain why I'm not interested in this right now. You don't have to play anything. Just act normal. Just remember we're in a relationship. I promise I won't get into character enough to let you get too affectionate. But if I just hold your hand, it's no big deal. Besides, my parents are a little old-fashioned, and they don't recognize hugging in public or anything like that. Help me out, please, Jordan asked. Take a month's vacation, wherever you choose, and I'll pay for everything and clean up before you get there, so you don't have to clean up a month's worth of messes. Okay, fine, I'll do my best, Kimberly said, immediately regretting what she'd said. It's like jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge into the water, she thought. Just tell me more about your parents, and show me pictures of your childhood, she continued. It's strange when a groom doesn't tell his bride about his family. The more I know, the more chances for a successful role. When are your parents arriving? The day after tomorrow? In the evening we meet them, send their things home with the driver, and we go to dinner, get acquainted, celebrate the meeting, make plans. My parents will be here for a week. You and I are both visiting. So you'll have to rethink your daily routine, sleep longer, and by no means grab your usual chores, thinking it's the beginning of a vacation. Stupid. Why did you say yes when you should have said no right away? I'm in a panic. It would have gotten out of hand, Kimberly thought. He wasn't sure I'd agree. 50-50. I can't even tell my friends. They'd only scare me more. There's not much time. It was too late for regrets. You just had to tune in. That's all. Kimberly tuned in. She drew from the photograph a sturdy fisherman with short, wiry gray hair and clear eyes. The man had his arm around the shoulders of a small, round-faced woman proudly holding a huge mustached catfish by the gills, its tail reaching to the ground. A beautiful photograph, though taken by an amateur. Banal, everyday subjects can be very beautiful, her teacher had recently said. A favorite subject put her in a relaxed mood. I actually owe Jordan a lot, Kimberly thought. So if I have the opportunity to do something for him, I should do it, not speculate. Everything was going great, just like it had. Kimberly could feel it. Was she shaking like that for nothing? Maybe she wasn't. Seeing her excitement, which she couldn't hide, Nicholas and her parents did everything they could to make things easier for her. Let's just have a nice evening, Kimberly Ashley asked quietly in the cozy, darkened lobby of the country restaurant where they'd come for dinner. The men went to choose wine, and they lingered in front of the mirror. Can we use you? Please? I don't want anything formal. I want to forget about Nicholas's health fears and think about the future. A pleasant future. So don't try to please us. You know how I rehearsed the meeting with my future mother-in-law, Ashley continued. Nicholas was very attentive to his mother, and I wanted to seem good so that she would approve of me. I forgot my role out of fear, of course, and seemed like a complete fool. She probably even doubted that I was able to study to be an accountant. It's funny now. I went to accounting school, too. Kimberly suddenly felt like sharing. But I don't think I can bring myself to work in that specialty. It's not my thing. I just gave in to my mom and finished college. Not liking a job spoils a woman's character, Jordan's mother said. I like accounting, or I would have quit it a long time ago, no matter what anyone said. Jordan told us on the phone that you paint, that you have a natural talent. You just have to keep studying, Frank said. And he filmed some of your work and emailed it to us. My mother and I looked at them so much we almost missed the train. These dogs, cats, children, they're all so lifelike you could write stories about them. And when I saw Jordan's portrait, I was so relieved. Well, he's lucky at last. He's not being lied to. I can tell you love my son. I may not be an art historian, but that's the only way you can paint with love. It's not just about talent. I'm embarrassing you. Let's go see our boys. If Ashley hadn't led Kimberly by the hand, she wouldn't have seen where she was going. Her legs felt wobbly from the confusion. It was a good thing she was wearing low-heeled shoes and not high stilettos, or she'd have lost her footing. Of course, Kimberly forbade herself to think about it, shrugging off any suspicious thought. But she loved Jordan. Ashley had several dozen portraits of his son, 48 of them in different seasons, moods, and settings. All painted from memory, all safely stored at the bottom of her dresser, so her husband wouldn't accidentally see something he shouldn't. Kimberly was sure that even when she left his house for good, she would continue this series of portraits, for a long, long time, but always in secret. These works would never appear in her exhibitions. And today's conversation with her father, she will definitely write how they sit opposite each other, so similar and dissimilar at the same time, but both beautiful and happy. Can't be upset, can't spoil the evening, Kimberly told herself. I'll think of my silly feelings as a creative stimulus. I'm supposed to have unrequited passions. Since I'm all bohemian now, she tried to joke to herself. On a small dance floor in front of the restaurant fireplace, a very interesting couple was twirling in a slow dance. A sturdy, stately, gray-haired man moved not too dexterously. It was evident that he had not danced often in his life, but he was glowing with quiet joy and was not at all embarrassed by his lack of skill. His partner was a thin, red-haired girl in an elegant birch dress, a little confused, with a sad smile, but happy eyes. Don't be only dry with her. You'll die. Frank took the moment to speak to his son, while the couple danced and they were alone at the table. You have her so defenseless and so much younger. You're taking on a lot of responsibility. You won't let her down. I like Kimberly a lot, Jordan replied. I won't let you hurt her. She's such a girl. How shall I put it? Sophisticated, Ashley said suddenly. Jordan was glad he'd found the word. It was true. He just hadn't had time to realize what he'd noticed long ago. For a simpleton like me, she needs expensive dresses, a fireplace, a beautiful entourage. Hello, Alex, sang a familiar low, velvety voice behind me. Oh, hi, Mom, he said. I'll leave for 5 minutes. I'll talk to a friend. You won't miss me. He nodded quickly at Sabrina and almost forcibly took her away before her mother could realize it. My friend and I stopped for dinner, Sabrina said, stepping out onto the open porch. I see Alex is in interesting company. You could introduce her to her mom. I wouldn't say anything bad about you to her, she said with a snowy sneer. Only good things. I'm not sorry. I don't see why you should be nervous. You've always been so calm before. Did your affair with the young housekeeper wear you out so much? The girl's so cranky. I joined and decided to tell my father, Alex said coldly. Of course it will please him, but at his age you should be more careful. Think about your health. What was the purpose of what you said? He exhaled stiffly, trying to sound calm. We girls sometimes act without purpose. Naomi's carefree, tinkling voice came instead of Sabrina's. It was just hurtful to the girl. Very hurt. Yes, sweetheart. I think it's disrespectful to your parents to make them spend their evenings in the company of your roommate, your housekeeper. You have to separate those aspects of your life, Sabrina said. That's what I wanted to say to Alex as, shall we say, an old friend. What did you say? Naomi heard everything perfectly well. To think of it, the housekeeper. Her eyes lit up with joyous excitement. What a woe. Are we ashamed to dishonor our family by sitting at the same table with her? I don't know where you were brought up, but it's no surprise that people get acquainted at work and girls marry their bosses. I'm determined to have a good evening and have no intention of hearing nasty things about my future daughter-in-law. All the best. Sabrina politely sang to her mother and hurriedly disappeared into the semi-darkness of the hall without showing any emotion. What a phrase. Ashley blurted out angrily. And you're good too. What do you take me and my father for? Did you think we'd be against a daughter-in-law who worked for you as an au pair? Up to 1,000 girls take such jobs while they're studying waitresses, hotel maids. More than half of them are students. You know that, don't you? I like to talk, and I get to know everyone on vacation, so I know what I'm talking about. To avoid embarrassing Kimberly, I'm going to keep my mouth shut for now. She's nervous enough as it is. Poor girl, let's go over there. Your daddy must have had a lot to eat while I was gone. He danced and worked up an appetite, and he'll take care of him later. They got home so late that all they had to do was feed the dogs and go to bed. Frank had to go for his first checkup by noon tomorrow. Kimberly couldn't figure out whether she wanted or feared to be alone in her cabin. To remember once more the details of this evening and somewhere find the strength to play her part again tomorrow? May Frank get better. And we can think about finding a clever way out later. It'll be something to remember if she ever has a daughter. She'll show her a few dozen portraits of the same man and tell her the story. Rosemary slowed down her perpetual motion machine a bit when she managed to talk her husband into going to bed. That's it, boys. You finally waited until you were alone, she said. You've had enough of us today, and we'll be here for the rest of the week. Good night, darlings. Frank and Rosemary closed the guest bedroom door behind them, and Kimberly and Jordan went out onto the porch. It was so quiet in the garden that they could hear dogs barking in the distance. Did you get along well in this garden? Kimberly asked, trying to sound calm and reasonable. Am I doing all right so far? It's been wonderful, Jordan assured her in a strangely warm voice. Only thanks to your... Oh, sorry, your parents are so easy to deal with. It's hard for me to switch. I'm a little tired. No, I was going to ask you myself, he said. Let's go, you don't look at me. Only at me like a jerk, after what I'm about to say. If I don't say it, I might miss a very important opportunity. And I don't usually do that. Let's really be together. It's not for fun. Not out of boredom. I want to see you every day, and I won't get bored. What do you say to that? I don't like it like this at all. Kimberly nodded her head quietly toward her cabin. Come on, I'll show you 48 of your portraits. I'll even give you one if you like it. Tina walked down the street and could not believe her happiness. She, a simple girl from a small town, was able to realize her dream and enter a prestigious construction university. Even as a child, she loved to play with a toy builder's kit, which she found under the Christmas tree. From morning till evening, the little girl never took off her bright yellow helmet and never parted with the plastic tools, imagining herself a great builder worthy of her parents. And what do you want? After all, your whole family is like that. Numerous acquaintances and relatives of the large and friendly family declared in a voice. Tina's father, Stephen, was a famous sculptor. The girl's mother, Hilary, was also directly related to construction and architecture. For many years, she worked at the Department of Landscape Architecture. Genes, multiplied by the intelligence and talent of a young girl, did their job. And now Tina, incredibly proud and satisfied with high exam scores, at all pairs flew home to her favorite Aunt Shelley, who kindly let the 18-year-old student live. The old woman's apartment was not far from the university where her beloved niece was enrolled. Her windows overlooked the busy square, which had first amazed Tina with its scale. When Tina came to the capital, about which she had heard so much, she found it alien and inhospitable. This opinion was formed in the first days of living in a city with a population of many millions. However, Shelley quickly helped the inexperienced girl to settle in. For hours on end, they walked along the main streets in bohemian neighborhoods. Auntie, a native resident, enjoyed sharing memories of the bygone days when she was as young and beautiful as Tina herself. After these walks, the girl finally and irrevocably fell in love with the wide avenues and narrow streets that beckoned and attracted the eyes of tourists, as if promising to open the veil of mystery. One such evening, just before Christmas, Shelley insisted that Tina wear her best outfit and get her hair done. The lights. The dusty roses wonderfully accentuated young Tina's exquisite beauty. Aunt Shelley personally took care of her niece's hair, styling the blonde locks that went all the way down to her waist into an elaborate style. After a while, the old silver-rimmed mirror reflected a young beauty who looked at the world with wide-open eyes. "Auntie, is it really me?" Tina marveled, twirling in front of the mirror and enjoying the subtle scent of floral perfume. Her cheeks flushed brightly in anticipation of a real Christmas miracle. She felt like Cinderella preparing for her first ever royal ball. Tina ran her hand down her slender neck, touching for a moment the strand of pink pearls her aunt had given her for her 18th birthday. "Of course you are, sweetheart. Unfortunately, nowadays young people do not try to emphasize their own individual beauty. All girls look like sisters. The same lips, eyelashes, hair, eyebrows," said the woman, tinting her lips with bright lipstick. Her velvet evening dress of a noble wine color emphasized her aristocratic features. Despite her advanced age, Shelley was still a good-looking woman who always drew attention to herself. "You look marvelous tonight, and you're sure to outshine a lot of women," Tina said sincerely, admiring the stately figure of the majestic woman. "And that ruby brooch makes you look like a queen. Where did you get it?" Tina touched the tulip-shaped brooch, topped with a crown of tiny rubies and diamonds that shimmered like dewdrops. "Thank you for the compliment. How can I compete with you? With your youth and freshness," Shelley replied. "Always be a sweet, kind, humble girl. Those virtues have always been valued by men. And now, sweetheart, it's time for us to go out because you don't want to be late for the theater." "Auntie, but you didn't say where you got that brooch," Tina repeated, throwing her coat back on her shoulders. "It was given to me by my late husband on my wedding day. He always compared me to a flower. And tulips were his favorite flowers," Shelley continued. "Their shy and delicate buds delighted me throughout our married life. On every holiday I received a bouquet of tulips tied with a scarlet ribbon to symbolize our love. Fortunately, my husband did not spoil me with attention and gifts, but it is this gift that is dear to my heart. Auntie, I wish I could love someone with the same sincere and fiery love." Tina sighed. "You've got a long way to go, my dear," Shelley said, flirtatiously fixing her hair. "You're too young to realize the beauty of first meetings, shy glances and tender touches. Now let's hurry, or all our efforts will be wasted." It's not for nothing that we took so long to get dressed up." Tina nodded in response and let the older woman take her arm and head for the exit. The thought of a happy marriage never entered her pretty head. And what girl wouldn't dream of a long-awaited meeting with her beloved that would turn her world upside down? Thinking about all this, Tina answered her aunt's questions absent-mindedly and looked at the shining streets of New York, bathed in thousands of twinkling garlands. Despite the traffic jams, they arrived at the Metropolitan Opera House on time, and even had time to admire the spacious lobby of the theater, its luxury and solemnity. In the very center of the lobby stood a tall pine tree, surrounded by gifts wrapped in gilded paper. Tina was particularly impressed by the antique toys that magically attracted attention. Pewter soldiers in brightly colored uniforms were absolutely enchanted by beautiful ballerinas frozen in a jump. Their open-work lace skirts, decorated with feathers and rhinestones, swayed from side to side, as if their owners were alive. Taking a seat in the box next to Shelley, Tina was out of reality for a few hours. The ballet nutcracker completely captured her, subdued her, and carried her into unknown distances. Together with the brave little Marie, she spun around the ornately decorated Christmas tree, fought hordes of rats, walked with the prince, the nutcracker's bow, through the fairy tale forest in anticipation of the holiday. When the action was over, Tina found her cheeks wet with tears and her chest heaving with joy and happiness from the fairy tale production. Having visited the theater only once in her life, Tina had fallen in love with it forever. Returning home, the happy but tired women immediately headed to their bedrooms. After changing into cozy pajamas, Tina took off her makeup and untangled her curls in preparation for sleep. That night, Tina had wonderful, magical dreams in which she was surrounded by the care and love of a tall, dark-haired man whose face she could not see. No matter how hard she tried, his voice so dear and sweet to her heart, repeating over and over again the words of love, caused her to feel the same way. But a sudden black whirlwind shattered the idyll of the happy fairy tale. To her horror, Tina discovered that it was not a young man, but the Mouse King himself who was clutching her in his arms. His clawed paws, covered with short black hair, left marks on her shoulders. In fear, the girl looked into his scarlet eyes, dimly shimmering on his sinister face, proud ears with protruding stubble and short but sharp fangs. "You are mine now, mine forever," the Mouse King shouted gloatingly as he put the crown on her and watched her turn into a rat. With difficulty, Tina managed to escape from the embrace of her nightmare. Wet with sweat and tangled hair, she terrified Aunt Shelley, who was awakened in the middle of the night by her screams. "Honey, did you have a bad dream? Don't feel bad, it happens. It's just a dream. Soon the morning will come and your fears will go away like smoke," Shelley comforted her crying niece. Her affectionate hands clasped the girl to her, and she never stopped stroking Tina's hair. I saw him, and I'll never forget his ratty look," the girl said and burst into tears. "But worst of all, he put a crown on me, and I turned into a disgusting rat, just like him." "Tina, but that's impossible. You realize that wearing a crown doesn't make you a nice, pretty girl. You're just very impressionable. Did the ballet we saw the night before stick in your memory?" "Yes. Oh, honey, please don't cry. You don't want to upset your Aunt Shelley, do you? After all, I was the one who initiated this unfortunate trip." "Okay, Auntie, you must be right. It's just that my dream was so vivid and memorable that I completely lost my head," Tina agreed. Shelley didn't seem to mind, but she was alarmed by her niece's dream that she'd had on Christmas Eve. Dreams that occurred on Christmas Eve usually spoke of global changes and warned of danger. The woman began to believe in dreams after the death of her husband, whom she loved more than life. A week before the tragedy, she saw herself in a cemetery with a bouquet of tulips, the flowers that her husband so idolized. She silently placed them on a fresh grave and wandered along the road. A few days later, a heart attack took from Shelley the man in whom she saw the meaning of her life. Had it not been for the children, who surrounded their mother with affection and care, it is likely that the old woman would have followed her husband, unable to bear the bitter separation. The recollection of bygone days aroused in her breast a long-forgotten bitterness. No, her wound wasn't fresh, but her soul was still sore, covered with crosses and scars. Shelley tried hard to live and rejoice in each new day allotted to her, so as not to upset in any way her spouse who watched over her from heaven. And now, hugging her niece tightly, She rejoiced that fate had been gracious to her and had given her the opportunity to care for her kinsman. "Auntie, why are you crying?" The girl marveled and remembered her late husband, Robin. He also comforted me, hugged me, and said kind words when I woke up from terrible nightmares. Tina was amazed at her aunt's candor, who rarely mentioned her late husband's name, but kept silent, trying not to open wounds that were fresher than she had thought. The girl hugged the woman tightly and whispered words of gratitude. They never slept that night and went to the kitchen to drink fragrant tea and have a heart-to-heart talk, looking out the window as the wind carried the snowflakes to the windows of high-rise buildings, carefully covering the city with a downy blanket. So day by day, in the hustle and bustle and daily routine, the winter passed, and the beautiful spring came. Spring generously gave everyone its warmth. The first flowers were blooming everywhere, and the trees were quietly shining with young tender leaves. Together with spring, Tina's life changed a lot. Participating in a university beauty contest, the girl took first place, impressing all the judges with her natural beauty and charm. Next to the other girls, she was like a breath of fresh mountain air in the middle of a smog-covered city. One of the invited guests was absolutely enchanted by the young beauty and even offered Tina a contract with the Angel modeling agency. His wife, Catherine, after whom the agency was named, a formerly successful model, seeing Tina, immediately predicted a great future for her. Despite the fear of her parents, who did not want their only daughter to drop out of university, Tina took a leave of absence and took training courses for models. A month later, the girl plunged headfirst into a luxurious modeling life. From morning until the evening, she participated in shows, showing others only the most exquisite and refined clothes. Aunt Shelley supported her niece in everything, accompanying the girl at fashion shows and photo shoots, sincerely rejoicing at her success. At one of these shows, which opened Tina, something absolutely extraordinary happened, which turned the girl's life forever. Thanks to the efforts of decorators and designers, the country house of an influential businessman turned into a real savannah. When the light went out in the hall, and there was only the illumination of the mirrored podium, everyone took their seats in the auditorium and prepared for the show. Light ethnic music started playing, and the hostess in a bright yellow dress, which made her look like an exotic flower, came to the microphone and made a welcoming speech. Opening the show was a young diva named Tina, the talented discovery of Angel Modeling House. Slender beauty in a colorful airy dress and a painted scarf tied on her head like a turban, with the grace of a panther before the jump came to the podium flooded with dazzling light of spotlights. Her movements were polished and precise, smoothly walking on high heels with high lacing, now and then exposing her slender legs and the bold slits of her dress. She strode to the end of the podium like a goddess. After a quick glance around the audience, the girl deftly flapped her long silk sleeves, more like giant wings. Proudly, she turned around and disappeared backstage. Her back shone from the myriad of sequins applied to her body. The guests of the show, both men and women, were absolutely mesmerized by the young diva with snow-white skin and turquoise-colored eyes. That evening, dozens of luxurious outfits with humorous prints, fringe, bright colors, and unusual patterns were demonstrated. Large jewelry and extraordinary dresses, blouses, skirts, pants, sundresses, and overalls attracted the attention of the city's fashionistas, who closely followed the performance. Each of them was ready to part with a tidy sum of money just to become a happy owner of fashionable clothes. But the stronger half of humanity was more attracted by long-legged beauties, blondes, brunettes, shades, and redheads. Representatives of the modeling business charmed many. Married men could afford only occasionally glance at the girls, giving more time to their companions. But bachelors came to the show with only one purpose: to choose a worthy spouse, who will look spectacular against the background of her husband and will be able to support small talk. At least a dozen models were invited, but only Tina's name was on everyone's lips. All the other girls, many of whom were world-famous models with rich experience, paled in comparison to the young wonder. Designers quarreled among themselves, wishing that the clothes under their brand advertised only Tina. And modeling agencies offered the girl huge sums of money and the most favorable conditions, hoping for fruitful cooperation. However, Tina was faithful to her choice. She firmly decided to stay in the modeling house, which discovered her talent and did so much good for her. And its owner, the talented and energetic Catherine, had long been Tina's best friend with whom she could discuss anything. After the luxurious show, there was no less luxurious buffet. Champagne was flowing. Exotic fruits and light appetizers were simply amazing. Live music sounded from everywhere, creating a special mood when you want to dance all night long, despite the fatigue. Tina, dressed in a gold jumpsuit with a deep neckline and pants, looked simply dazzling that night. Her long blonde hair was slicked back and gathered into a high ponytail. A minimum of makeup on her face only emphasized her natural beauty and young age. Ignoring the champagne, the girl allowed herself only a little fruit, remembering that even a perfect figure should be watched and kept in tone. However, she so sometimes wanted to relax and allow herself something delicious. Tina especially missed her mother's apple pies with cinnamon. At first, this magical aroma followed the girl from everywhere, and even a sip of celery smoothie was like a native taste from her childhood. Now her menu was dominated by fruits and vegetables, eggs, avocado, and fish. But she had to forget about fast food, carbonated drinks, and baked goods. But what won't you do for a successful career? Thanks to her strong character and endurance, the girl was able to quickly adapt to the new regime of the day, regular training and proper nutrition. Sometimes she still allowed herself a little dark chocolate or ice cream with salted caramel, which she simply adored. However, having allowed herself small weaknesses, Tina always returned to her former life, perfectly realizing that the right lifestyle is the key to health, vigor, and longevity. Success and universal recognition came to her overnight, but could also evaporate if she didn't put so much effort into it. In just a few months, she was able to pay for her parents to take a trip to Hawaii that they had dreamed of not too long ago, but had always put off for the sake of buying a TV, couch, or a refrigerator. To her aunt, she gave a diamond bracelet. Knowing well her love for jewelry, Tina signed up for English courses, realizing that soon she would have to travel all over the world, and a knowledge of foreign languages has never hurt anyone. Despite a rather busy schedule and constant employment, the girl was insanely happy. After all, she had such a chance to communicate with people, make acquaintances, learn new things, wear high-quality clothes, and in the future even travel the world. At the same time, Tina did not become conceited. She was still the same simple, sweet, and compassionate girl. She donated part of her royalties to an orphanage and a shelter for homeless animals. The thought that she could now help those in need warmed her. However, when she randomly stumbled upon the same children's play set of building materials, which she brought with her to Los Angeles as a talisman, a slight sadness came over her. After all, she had had her hand raised to give up a childhood dream. After chatting with people for a while, Tina stepped aside to do a little dance, swaying from side to side. She closed her eyes and imagined herself on a deserted island, where the sound of the surf delighted her ears and the hot sand beckoned her to throw off her uncomfortable shoes. During the dreamy moments, Tina did not notice that someone approached her from behind, and a powerful male hand touched her waist, turning her around. The illusion of an island paradise shattered into pieces, and the indignant beauty prepared to fight back against the scoundrel, who had clearly allowed himself too much. Turning to the man and meeting the tender gaze of his eyes, Tina realized she was lost. Angry words froze in her chest. A tall man in a black tuxedo firmly took hold of her thoughts. "Let me ask you to dance, beautiful stranger," the man of her dreams said in a low velvet voice. Tina nodded in response, forgetting that she could speak. The man grinned, realizing the effect his presence had on the girl. He took the small hand in his own and led her away from the other dancing couples. A few minutes in his arms seemed like an eternity to her. When the song ended and the man removed his hands from his partner's slim waist, Tina felt disappointment. She wanted the pleasure she felt around this stranger to last as long as possible. Touching his lips to her arm, the man thanked her for the dance and suddenly disappeared. Just as he appeared, the tart scent of his woody perfume lingered in the air. Tina, who was in a state of euphoria, was soon found by her friend Catherine. The red-haired American in a cool scarlet suit confidently approached the girl and spoke in plain English. "Reporting to my ward. Tina, what are you doing here? All alone. You know it's not safe. There's champagne flowing in this house. Anything could happen. There are so many men around, and you're a beautiful girl. You shouldn't have been so far away from me, should you?" "Catherine, I'm 18 years old and I'm not a child," replied Tina rather harshly. But when she saw that her friend was upset, she changed her anger into mercy. "You yourself insisted that I take self-defense courses. Don't worry about me, I just did a little dance. I'm fine, aren't I? You don't know what I've learned." The American girl started talking. "I'm whispering the latest gossip in your ear." "What is it this time?" "Catherine, You know I don't like gossip. Listen to me for once. Do you know whose house this is and who organized the show? I bet you can't guess, Catherine said, pausing solemnly. And then continued Paul himself. Can you imagine? Who is he? The girl asked tiredly, wishing she could take off her uncomfortable stilettos as soon as possible. What are you, a friend? Catherine marveled. Okay, I'm a married woman, but you should know potential suitors by sight. Paul is a very successful businessman, and he is also incredibly handsome. Women are all over him. But it's never been more than a fling. Why would I want him like that? Tina asked. You don't know what prospects will open up for you, silly. You will not always be young and pretty, said Catherine. That's why you have to prepare the ground for your future life now. I, for example, finished my career with dignity, opened a modeling agency. And you, if you become the wife of a businessman like Paul, you can conquer the world. I'm not interested in that, Tina replied. I'm only going to marry for love, not convenience. I met someone today, by the way. I just don't know his name. He's an amazing dancer. And he's got this honeyed voice. What? You seem to be really in love. Tina was interrupted by her friend. Well, nothing. Live with him in a rented apartment. From paycheck to paycheck, you will lose his socks and listen to his complaints that no one loves him and does not appreciate. And that way, there's nothing left of your love. You'll be lucky if he doesn't bring home any girls. Catherine, you're just being opinionated as usual, Tina objected. But why are you so pessimistic? I'm a realist, honey, she said. I've been through it all. I found a handsome guy, fell in love, and he just spent the money my parents sent me for school. Luckily, I was smart enough not to get pregnant by him, or my life would have gone down the drain. No money, no home, no profession, and in a foreign country. I was just trying my hand at modeling and had never even thought about it. Then I met David, who recognized my talent at one of the auditions and helped me move up the career ladder. In return, he demanded nothing from me. No close relationships. I was amazed by his intelligence and intellect, and only years later I realized that I loved and respected this man. When I confessed my feelings to him, it turned out that he had fallen in love with me at the first meeting, but was afraid to scare me off with his pressure. He waited patiently for me to be ready for a new relationship. He became a good friend to me first, and then a loving husband. Well, your example proves that miracles do happen, Catherine said. But not to everyone, baby. If you knew how many girls broke down after their brilliant career overnight collapsed. So forget your fairy tale prince on a white horse. It was probably just a waiter hitting on a pretty girl. No, Catherine, I don't believe you, Tina said. True love can't bring only misery to lovers. Tina tried to object, but the host's voice called all the guests back to the main hall. Ladies, gentlemen, may I have your attention now, the hostess said. A man to whom many African families owe their lives will now take the stage, because all the money from this show will be donated to families in need. Kindergartens and schools will be built in remote African provinces. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask Paul to come up on stage. There was loud applause, and the girls in the audience tried to get as close to the podium as possible to get a closer look at the man who approached the microphone. Tina, who was standing quite close to the stage, was almost swept aside by the nimble wealth hunters. Fortunately, Catherine was nearby and cleared the way cleverly from the girls with unnatural lips. Meanwhile, Tina was upstairs. Hearing the clinking of broken glass from her husband's room, she rushed to help. The girl stumbled and carelessly rolled down the stairs. Her parents found Tina a minute later in a pool of blood. At the hospital, it turned out that she got off lightly, miraculously having broken nothing. The baby, strangely enough, was fine. At the girl's request, she was discharged, although the doctors insisted on hospitalization. But Tina was in a hurry to see her husband, and without hesitation, signed a refusal of hospitalization. During the night, she started bleeding, and the girl lost the baby. From that moment in their family came a black streak. Once happy spouses stopped talking to each other. At the same time, everyone blamed themselves Paul for trying to get up early, and Tina could not forgive herself for her own carelessness and refusal of medical supervision. But time heals wounds. A year and a half later, Paul was already moving on crutches, then with a cane, and then began to walk on his own, occasionally holding on to the walls. Tina tried to return to the modeling business, but it turned out that everyone forgot about her. On the catwalk now shone new stars. In dire need of money, Tina took any job, starring in dubious commercials and photo shoots. They paid little, but it was better than nothing. The girl had to sell all her expensive jewelry and branded things to hold out as long as possible. In time, Paul got a job in a prestigious firm and, thanks to his talent, rapidly rose up the career ladder. Although life began to get better, there was still a chill and alienation in the family. The loss of a child had a negative impact on both. And after all, the long-awaited baby should have further strengthened their union. But fate was favorable to their family and allowed them to feel like parents again. When Tina became pregnant, the ice between the spouses melted, giving way to love, tenderness, and affection. Throughout the pregnancy, Tina took care of her health, remembering the unsuccessful previous pregnancy. The girl walked in the fresh air, ate properly, and tried not to tire herself with physical exertion. But it did not help much, and soon the future mommy learned the terrible news: her child has a heart defect, with which children, as a rule, do not live long. The young parents traveled to all clinics in Los Angeles, hoping for a mistake of doctors in deciphering the ultrasound. But the miracle did not happen. In a few months, Tina was to give birth to a sick child who could leave them at any moment. To Tina's horror, Paul insisted on terminating the pregnancy. Shocked by his behavior, the girl did not recognize the former, loving and tender spouse. "Come on, this child will not survive anyway. It is better to do it at once than to say goodbye to him." After a year of suffering and agony, the man tried to explain to his wife his point of view. "I will not allow my child to be harmed. It would break me. Don't you understand that?" Tina objected with tears in her eyes. "What if it's just a mistake? We'll get rid of our little angel with our own hands." "Are you deaf? The baby's sick. Half of Los Angeles told you that. The most humane thing we can do as parents is to put him out of his misery. Do you enjoy carrying around the sick and injured? Personally, I don't. Anyway, I shouldn't have gotten involved with you. Because you're defective. You ruined your first child, and now you want to give me a sick one." "How can you say that?" Tina couldn't believe her ears. "After all, I took care of you, kept quiet, tolerated your character, and finally sacrificed my career for you. And now you blame me for not keeping our baby. Didn't anyone ask you to do that? What a Mother Teresa. Tina, I'm telling you one more time, if you don't get rid of the baby, it's over between us." "Paul, please tell me you're just joking around. Don't leave us, please. We really need your help. The doctors say a heart defect isn't a cure. If we operate, the baby has a good chance of living a full life." "Ah, yes, a miracle operation that's going to cost me a fortune. Have you forgotten that I'm not rich anymore? Or are you suggesting I sell my parents' castle in Scotland? No way. These doctors won't even guarantee the baby's recovery." "Paul, I don't recognize you. When did you become such a devil?" "When I married you, spent a lot of money on the wedding, the honeymoon, and nearly became an invalid after spending my entire fortune on medical treatment. When I married you." "It's easy to be kind when you're rich. It's easy to be kind when you're rich. Try doing good deeds when you're poor and have no money," Paul said. "If you want to know, I'm glad it turned out this way. I have another woman, and she, unlike you, will be able to give me healthy children." Paul's last words sounded to Tina like a thunderbolt. The girl could not breathe, stunned by the betrayal of the man she loved. Tina regretted only one thing: that her husband had revealed his despicable nature so late. In one thing she was sure of 100%: she would keep the child and, if necessary, at the cost of her life. Not wishing to remain in this house, the owner of which brought her so much pain, the girl hurriedly packed her things and left for Aunt Hilary, who was deeply affected by Paul's deed. "There, Auntie, my dream has come true," said Tina. "Remember the night before Christmas when we went to the ballet? Paul is the stranger who turned into a giant rat. I sacrificed my life for him, and the girl didn't finish and cried. Honey, remember the baby. It is absolutely contraindicated for you to worry and get upset," answered Hilary. "My parents and I will help you as much as we can. Catherine, I think, won't refuse either because she is your best friend. We will definitely apply to the aid fund and get our little girl to have an operation. If necessary, I'll sell all my jewelry and even my apartment." "My darling, don't cry. Please don't cry," the aunt continued. "Aunt, how can I thank you for your kindness and care? But the last thing I want is for you to lose your apartment. I will go to work if necessary. I will not eat and sleep, but I will save my little girl. And we're going to help you do it. Now you need a good night's sleep. You'll sleep better in the morning. Okay, I think I'll go to my room. Thank you for everything, Tina said and went to her bedroom. She lay on the bed, unable to close her eyes, and it was not until morning that she was able to fall asleep. In her sleep, Tina held the healthy little girl to her chest and cried, kissing her chubby pink cheeks and stroking her soft hair. The little girl looked just like her. The same blonde-haired angel with blue eyes. The next morning, Catherine came to Aunt Hilary's house and began to scold Paul in harsh terms. She and her husband David did not refuse to help. An old acquaintance, Catherine said. Catherine, through old connections, was able to get Tina to participate in several shows and photo shoots for pregnant women, for which the girl was paid decent money. Auntie still sold her jewelry, and Tina's parents sent a tidy sum, which they saved to buy a dacha. Sincere fans of Tina, penetrated by her story, sent money and things for the baby. When the baby was born, the girl named her Elizabeth, so that the angels would keep and protect her. The girl herself looked like a tiny angel. When Tina saw her daughter for the first time, she cried with happiness. The foundation was not left out either. Its founders agreed with the best surgeons in Israel, and the child underwent heart surgery. The prognosis of the Israeli doctors was promising. Little Elizabeth grew up to the joy of her mother, grandparents, and a completely ordinary child. The young mother had no time left for shows, but she had to live on something. Tina was no longer going to follow her relatives. Then the girl decided to finish New York State University of Construction, which at one time abandoned for the sake of modeling career. She became a part-time student. Studying was a joy for her. Tina did not notice how she finished her studies with honors. Red diploma helped her to get a job as a secretary in a leading construction firm. Pretty girl with a pleasant smile at first sight won the heart of the director of the company, Robin. However, Tina immediately made it clear to the man that she is only interested in work and nothing more. Over time, she was able to move up the career ladder, proving to everyone that she has not only a pretty appearance but also an analytical mind. Approaching creatively to the fulfillment of tasks and assignments, the girl always handed over objects on time, while not allowing the presence of errors or negligence in her subordinates. Tina began to occupy a high position in the firm, in which she came to work without work experience and any recommendations. All employees respected the boss, who with her labor and enthusiasm raised the firm to unprecedented heights. And how could it be otherwise? Because she was engaged in her favorite business. Tina was appreciated and respected not only for her determination and professionalism. A harsh but fair woman was kind and humane to her subordinates. In this firm worked a girl named Sophia, with whom Tina began a friendly relationship. The girl was a little younger than Tina, and something was similar to her boss. One day, Sophia came to work and solemnly announced that she was getting married soon. Colleagues began to congratulate the girl. Tina, who was curious to know who was the chosen one of her new friend, was not left out. During the lunch break, she called Sophia to the cafe to ask her about everything. The girl willingly agreed, and a few hours later the friends sat in a cozy cafe discussing the upcoming wedding. "Tina, have you ever been married?" Sophia asked, enjoying a strong espresso. "Mrs. Smith replied, not knowing what to say. She didn't want to tell about her failed marriage, so as not to scare the girl in love with her sad story. "So did you or didn't you?" "I know that you have a child, and with her father you have a strained relationship. Is that true, or are the girls just making it up?" "It's hard to call a relationship strained if it doesn't exist." Yes, I was married, and my ex-husband doesn't want to hang out with Elizabeth. Although I didn't forbid them to see each other. He just cut our daughter out of his life." "But why? Can a father abandon his own child?" "Yes, he can. If that man is Paul Smith." "What did you say, Paul Smith?" the girl repeated, not believing her ears. "Yes, you see, Sophia, I didn't always work for a construction firm. I was once a catwalk star, and then, like a fool, I fell in love with a man I didn't know very well. All he wanted was an heir, Tina began to tell me. My first pregnancy came just as Paul had accidentally injured his spine on a wedding trip while I was caring for him. as a result of an accidental fall down the stairs. I lost the baby. Paul changed a lot towards me after learning about this misfortune. But fate gave us a happy opportunity to feel like parents again. But little Catherine was born with a congenital heart defect and was not needed by her father. It's hard to believe, but he insisted on terminating the pregnancy. I still remember the look on his face and the hatred in his eyes for the fact that I could not give him the long-awaited heir. Now, thanks to the help of friends and family, my daughter is completely healthy. Sophia, why are you looking so pale? Are you not feeling well? I'm fine. I'm just a little dizzy. Maybe I shouldn't have had such strong coffee. I'm going out for a minute. I need to freshen up a bit. Can I help you? Tina asked thoughtfully, offering to help. No, it's okay. I'll be right back, she said, and headed toward the ladies' room. The same question was going through her mind: is our kind and caring Paul really Tina's ex-husband? Is her fiancé the same monster who abandoned his own daughter? Or is it just a ridiculous coincidence? Meanwhile, Sophia's cell phone rang, which she had left on the table. Tina glanced at the phone and recoiled in horror as if it were a rattlesnake. A picture of Paul Smith with the caption "Beloved" popped up on the screen. Tina realized with horror what a stupid thing she had done, accidentally telling Sophia the truth about her fiancé. What are we going to do now? Suddenly Paul is different. Suddenly he's no longer selfish, thinking only of himself. I seem to have just ruined his wedding. Somehow poor Sophia, Tina thought, and got up to go in search of her friend. However, there was no need to look for the girl. She herself came to the table and sat down on the sofa. No one called me, Sophia said. I heard the call. I guess your fiancé called you? Sophia picked up the phone and, deciding to finally understand the situation, called her fiancé and invited him to a cafe that was not far from his work. A few minutes later, the joyful man entered the cafe and froze in place, recognizing in Tina his ex-wife, who was sitting opposite his fiancé. Tina noticed him too. Her eyes widened with surprise. Life had taken its toll on Paul over the years. He was not old, but he was still irresistible. There were gray hairs in his thick hair, and the treacherous wrinkles at the corners of his eyes and lips betrayed the bitter fate he had suffered. He regretted his harsh words 100 times and longed to get in touch with his only daughter, Catherine. But he was ashamed to appear in front of Tina, who even now looked at him contemptuously. She, unlike him, had not changed a bit, still as slender and beautiful. Paul, you're just in time. Have a seat and meet my friend. Does she remind you of anyone? Or maybe she reminds you of your ex-wife who gave you the baby you gave up. When were you going to tell me about this? At the wedding or after? How can I trust you after everything that has happened? Sophia asked with pain in her voice. I knew revenge was a dish to be served cold, but I never thought you'd ruin my life, which was just starting to get better. Do you really hate me that much? Paul said, turning to Tina. I'm sorry, Tina whispered, feeling guilty about the lovers' quarrel. I didn't mean to, it just happened. Tina didn't do anything wrong. She didn't know you were my fiancé. The truth came out by accident, but I'm glad it did. I will never marry a man who has no heart, Sophia shouted, throwing her wedding ring at the groom, and ran out of the cafe. Paul rushed after her, but the girl had already disappeared around the corner in a cab. The man had no choice but to return to the cafe. I'm sorry, please, Tina said. I really didn't mean for things to turn out this way. You're the one who's sorry. Fate punished me severely for my selfishness and indifference. I didn't value my happiness, and that's why I gave it up so easily, Paul replied. You should not apologize to me, but to your daughter Catherine, who miraculously survived. Why didn't you even try to visit her, to ask how she was doing? I was ashamed to show my face to you, the man admitted. To her surprise, Tina saw tears in his eyes, which he tried to hide, not wanting to admit weakness. For a moment it seemed as if the long years that had divided their lives into before and after were gone. In front of her sat the old Paul, whom she had come to love with all her heart and soul. At that moment, Tina realized with horror that she still loved her former husband. You want to see your daughter? She's beautiful. Don't worry, I didn't say anything bad about you to Catherine. Neither did her mother. If you can, forgive me. I'm very guilty before you," whispered Paul, touching her hand. In his eyes, the woman saw the same fire of love that burned in her heart. "Let's go home and I'll introduce you to my daughter," Tina replied, pretending to be dry and emotionless. At home, they were greeted by a blonde, angelic girl with a stuffed rabbit in her arms. The little girl did look like her mother, but her features were also those of her father, who looked at her and couldn't get enough of his own little girl. Tears flowed down his cheeks. The man did not restrain his emotions and squatted down, hugged the baby, pressing her to his chest. "Mommy, who is it?" inquired the curious little girl. "Baby, remember you asked me where your daddy was and why he wasn't with us? Well, you see, he is. He was far away from us and couldn't visit you, my dear, though he wished it more than anything in the world. Every night he saw your beautiful face and dreamed of meeting you. And then one day his dream came true and he found you and me," Tina told her daughter. "Daddy, I love you so much. I knew it. I believed you would find us," cried the baby and threw herself on her father's chest, hugging him with her arms. "It was the angels who brought Daddy back to us, didn't they?" "Mom? I know it's angels. I often see them in my dreams and even play catch up with them." "I love you too, my darling girl. Now, tell me more about your dream. I want to know everything," Paul said. "But you play here and I'll go and put the kettle on," said Tina, and went to the kitchen. "I saw a lot of light in my dream," Catherine began her story. "It was soft pink and slightly shimmering. It even hurt my eyes. Suddenly I heard laughter, a resounding, merry one. It seemed to come from everywhere at once and throbbed in my temples. I felt calm and joyful. As I took a step toward the light, I felt an unprecedented lightness in my whole body. My feet left the ground, and I floated smoothly to the clouds." "What happened then?" Paul asked. "I woke up," the little girl said disappointedly. "It's nothing. I'm sure they'll come to play with you again." "So you believe me?" "Because Mom and Grandma say that it's my fantasy. I'm flying because I'm growing." "Of course I believe you. I'm sure the angels came to play with you. They love little children so much that they come to them in their dreams. There's a reason they call you Catherine. Do you want me to tell you my secret?" "Of course, Daddy," enthusiastically said the girl, making herself comfortable on the sofa. "I've never dreamed of angels, but that I have a guardian angel. I know for sure," said the man. "If it were not for him, I would hardly be sitting next to you. Yes, I have protectors. I'm not making it up. Ever since I was a child, in moments of danger, I have heard a quiet voice that helps me and gives me advice," Paul continued. "I remember the first time I heard my invisible counselor. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old at the time. No more. We were walking through the forest with the boys, picking mushrooms. I was a little behind them, and suddenly I heard clearly, 'Stop. Don't move.' I obediently froze and saw an adder crawling ahead of me. If I hadn't stopped then, it would have stung me." "Wow. Have you ever seen your angel?" the little girl asked. "No," Paul shook his head. "I have never seen it, but I heard it often in my childhood and youth. But whether he stays with us or not depends on the people themselves." "On the people?" Catherine questioned. "Angels help only good and bright people. If a person commits evil and despicable deeds, does not repent of them, he loses his protector. Remember, my daughter, offense, anger, cruelty do not lead to anything good. It must be very scary to lose your guardian angel." "It's scary, but everything can be corrected. If a person sincerely repent, apologize to God and begin to change for the better, he returns his patron. So take care of your angel, do not do bad things, and your protector will always be with you." "Daddy, is your angel with you?" "I've done a lot of bad things in my life, and as punishment I stopped hearing my protector. But heaven was kind to me and sent me another angel, your mother. I owe her a lot, including my life." "Wow, my mom's an angel. You bet she is," Catherine exclaimed. "Luckily you're just like her, my dear and beloved girl." Tina had been standing outside the door all this time, listening to every word her ex-husband said. Tears flowed down her cheeks and her heart and soul sobbed with her. Pride and love were tearing her in two. But true love always wins, breaking down any barriers that people sometimes erect between themselves knowingly. The strong walls between Paul and Tina crumbled, and they realized that they could not live without each other. And their hearts were joined by a real angel, their little daughter, with a bright, kind soul. When Paul saw Tina crying in the doorway, he approached her and gently wiped her tears. "Tina, be my angel. Till death do us part," said the man. The girl said nothing. And what was the point of words when two loving hearts, having overcome all the obstacles imposed by the villainous fate, united again? Catherine looked at the happy parents and realized that the angel really exists. After all, they returned her daddy, who will now forever be close to his little girl, who desperately needed a father. There was more peace on her soul than ever before, for Mommy and Daddy were finally together after a long separation. Paul and Tina remarried, which shocked all the relatives who thought that their wedding was a mistake. But how wrong they were. The family celebration was modest, without ostentatious luxury, but remembered happy newlyweds who could not tear themselves away from each other. 9 months later, Tina gave her beloved husband and daughter twins, who were exact copies of the spouse. Years passed, their common children grew up, had their own families, and gave them long-awaited grandchildren. However, Paul still did not take his wife in love and tender look, affectionately calling her no other than my angel. When a man approached the microphone and spoke, Tina was horrified to recognize him as the very stranger she had given the dance to. But why didn't he introduce himself? This must be just some kind of game or joke, she thought, and clenched her fists with anger. "Handsome, isn't he?" Catherine said admiringly, admiring the man. Tina mumbled something inaudible in response and, pushing the girls aside, left the hall. She walked on, not caring what she was doing, forgetting that the uncomfortable stilettos were hurting her feet. She was angry, and her emotions demanded an outlet. Suddenly, however, someone grabbed her arm. She thought she had caught her bracelet on some trinket and turned around sharply. It was not right to spoil her aunt's gift of a gold filigree bracelet. She glanced at Paul, who was clearly running after her, and looked at him scornfully, then turned away, folding her arms across her chest. "Tina, you must have misunderstood my intentions," Paul said. "How do you know my name?" "I know the names of everyone in the show," he replied calmly. "You must be very proud of your behavior," Tina exclaimed. "You charmed a girl, then disappeared from sight without even giving your name. I can imagine you bragging to your friends that you've graduated to another model who's crazy about you." Tina shouted this in the heat of anger, not realizing she was giving herself away. "So I've charmed you, then?" the man said, smiling. "Not at all," she denied, blushing. She realized that she had said too much. "But you have just confessed your feelings to me. I'm the eldest son, but I don't have a hearing problem yet. If you let me, I'll try to explain." "Okay, you have 5 minutes," Tina agreed. "Great," said the businessman, amazed at the girl's boldness in putting conditions on him. "The thing is that I really wanted to introduce myself at once, but I was afraid that you would perceive me not as an interesting person, but only as a money bag to be used. I was too often mistaken in my choice of soulmates and friends who only wanted money and connections from me." "Do you really think I'm as empty as most of the people here?" Tina said indignantly. "No, I wouldn't run after a man just because he's rich. I could see it in your eyes when you saw me on stage at the microphone. You looked like a furious Amazon in that moment." Paul smiled. "Please forgive me. Can I ever hope to be friends with you? But don't be silent, please. I see that you are still angry. How can I make amends?" "Don't ever lie to me again, Paul. More than anything else in the world, I can't stand lying," replied Tina in a serious voice. "I'd like to get to know you better. Let's meet in the park next weekend." "I'd love to," Paul replied. "I won't hide my feelings from you. I like you very much. You're like a ray of sunshine coming into my life." He tried to kiss her hand. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Tina dodged him. "I don't know you at all, and you don't know me either." But who was she trying to deceive at this moment? She had dreamed most of all of his embrace. "I don't agree with you," said Paul. "I feel as if I had known you all my life, but I don't want to frighten you with my confession." Soon they returned to the guests who were waiting for the host. Seeing the couple, who looked stunning together, cameras were clicking from all sides. "I'm sorry, my guest was so engrossed in looking around the house that she got completely lost," the man explained his absence. "Luckily, I was there to help." "What does that mean?" Elizabeth ran up to her friend and demanded an explanation. "Elizabeth, Paul Sobolev is the stranger I told you about," Tina said. "He explained everything to me, and we're meeting in the park this weekend." "Wow. You're lucky, my friend. He's totally smitten with you. You can see it with the naked eye, but don't lose heart and get him to marry you," Elizabeth exclaimed. "I can just see your magnificent wedding that the Queen herself would envy. An old chateau in France, the cream of society, crystal glasses and bridesmaids in evening gowns. And you, my dear, in a luxurious dress with a train, custom made by the best designer." "Oh, your imagination is running wild, isn't it?" Tina laughed. "It's not the kind of wedding I'm dreaming of. A small, modest celebration on the ocean. I have tropical flowers in my hair. And most importantly, no shoes. Sometimes they just annoy me." "You have no imagination at all," categorically declared the girlfriend, having listened to the wedding dream of Tina. When the buffet was over, Tina was happy to go home. The clock showed 2, and her aunt was already resting, having never waited for her niece. She took a quick shower and changed into her favorite Mickey Mouse pajamas and got ready for sleep, which, despite her fatigue, never came. Tina thought of Paul, his brown eyes and good-natured smile that had completely enchanted her. "I wonder what Paul is really like," she wondered, and immediately fell into the arms of Morpheus. In her dream, the girl twirled in a waltz with a tall, dark-haired man who mesmerized her mind with ardent words of love. Suddenly, the light fell on his face. Tina recognized Paul as the dancer. He was dressed in a black shirt and matching colored pants. His eyes looked at her promisingly. There was a smile on his face that for some reason frightened Tina. "Will you be mine?" he growled. His beautiful face contorted and his eyes were bloodshot. In response to his words, a snide, mousy giggle erupted from all sides. Tina shrieked in horror and tried to pull away from Paul, but his strong arms held her tighter and tighter, denying her the ability to breathe. In the morning, Tina had no memory of her dream and was happy to share the emotions of last night. Her aunt, who listened to her carefully, wished to meet the man who had captured her niece's heart. The long-awaited weekend came unexpectedly quickly. For the date in the park, Tina wore denim overalls and a bright blue t-shirt with a bold, youthful inscription in English. She pinned her hair into 2 pigtails, then pinned it up in 2 buns on the side of her face, leaving a few strands out and curling them with a curling iron. She didn't wear any makeup, just a touch of pink lip balm and a dab of black mascara on her lashes. Satisfied with the result, Tina put on her thick-soled white sneakers and, kissing her aunt, hurried to the park. Paul was already waiting for her. He was sitting on a bench, and next to him was a huge bouquet of tea roses. The girl hardly recognized him without a suit and tie. Clad in a light sweater and worn jeans, he obviously felt out of place, constantly looking at his watch. But Tina liked this Paul even better. He looked no more than 35 years old. However, a slight grayness had already touched his black hair. Seeing the girl, he got up and handed her the flowers, not hiding his admiring look. "What beautiful flowers." Tina was pleased with the flowers, inhaling their sweetness and fragrance. "How long have you been waiting? I'm not late." "No, I'm so on time. I just got here early. I was afraid I'd be late," Paul replied. "Let's go for a walk." Tina bravely took the man's hand, and they walked along the shady alley, densely planted with trees. They walked around the park, talking about everything: movies, music, literature, things they liked and disliked. For a few hours they learned a lot about each other, rode on the rides. After visiting the Room of Fear and eating cotton candy, the young people realized that now they could hardly live without each other. Tina and Paul tried to meet each other every chance they got. Together they went to the theater, to the ballet, to the movies, to restaurants and cafes. The happy girl introduced Aunt Hillary to her fiancé, who made the most favorable impression on the old woman. After all, the man was educated, intelligent, and polite. In addition, he idolized her niece and literally carried her in his arms. It was clearly going to be a wedding. To everyone's surprise, this joyous moment came unexpectedly quickly. One day, Tina returned home after dinner with her beloved in a luxurious restaurant with a coveted ring on her ring finger. The diamond in the white gold ring was obscenely large and shone so bright that everyone in the modeling agency almost choked with envy, looking at the masterpiece of jewelry art. Tina herself could not get used to the fact that she was now a bride and would soon be the wife of her favorite man. Admiring the stone, the girl imagined a family life with a man dear to her heart. But who said that dreams don't come true? After meeting Tina's parents, whom Paul also charmed, it was decided to celebrate the wedding in the fall in an ancient Scottish castle, which had belonged to his family for many years. Tina balked as much as she could, but her lover quickly convinced her of his idea, going for a little trickery. He proposed to arrange a small vacation and go to Scotland for a few days to admire the natural beauty of a unique and mysterious country. "Darling, just imagine a little picnic at the edge of Loch Ness, whose dark, ominous waters hold secrets and reflect the gloomy walls of an ancient castle," Paul said. "And you will also love the high mountains and crystal clear lakes lost in the mountains, picturesque villages, fragrant heathlands. And then I'll show you the castle. They say it's been haunted for years." "You make it sound so interesting that I'm ready to go on a trip right now," Tina agreed. Scotland really struck her in the heart with its ancient castles, flowery meadows, and centuries-old history, which was enthusiastically whispered in the ear of her beloved Paul, who was well acquainted with the traditions and customs of this country. And when they drove up to the castle, which belonged to her fiancé, the girl could not hide her admiration. The majestic building with time-worn gray walls covered with ivy against the background of emerald meadows looked impressive. Tina froze with delight. She had changed her mind and agreed with her lover that the castle was the best option for the wedding feast. The inside of the manor was as superb as the outside. Feeling like a fairy tale princess, the girl walked through the numerous rooms, anticipating how magical the staircases decorated with white lilies and cream roses would look, and from the ceilings would hang crystal chandeliers, flickering in the flames of candles. Tina was particularly struck by the spiral staircase that led up to a small tower. From the windows there was a marvelous view of the garden bathed in the golden red rays of the sunset. In the distance, on the grassy slopes, a flock of sheep grazed, and shepherds kept watch over the flock, deftly controlling the dogs. After dinner in the beautifully furnished living room with a real fireplace and ancient tapestries, Tina went to the bedroom, where a luxurious four-poster bed occupied half the room. By the way, there were about 30 rooms in the castle, as well as a wine cellar, a spacious pantry, a kitchen, a library, and a stone hall. Out of all the proposed bedrooms, the girl liked the silver room the most, where the walls, furniture, and carpets were made in noble silver shades, striking with its luxury even the most refined and demanding persons. Tina looked into a huge mirror in a silver frame in the form of intertwined patterns and mythical animals, and remembered a legend that said that mirrors contained the souls of all those who looked into them, putting fears and doubts aside. The girl approached her reflection and began brushing her hair. Then she changed into the finest silk shirt and went to bed. How nice it was to be covered with a downy blanket. During the night, she wished she had brought her pajamas from home to keep her warm on a chilly night. Instead, her closet was dominated by lace and silk nightgowns. Who would have thought that even in summer it could be chilly in Scotland? After midnight, a thunderstorm suddenly broke out. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the room. Thunder rumbled. Rain poured down like a bucket. The figures of unicorns and mermaids on the lamps seemed to come to life and began dancing on the silver patina walls. Suddenly, one of the windows opened and raindrops fell on the face of the girl, who was sleeping soundly and did not hear the sounds of the weather. Instantly awake, Tina ran to the window and closed the latch tightly. On her way back, she caught a glimpse of some movement in the corner of the room, and for a moment the mirror reflected a pale girl in an opulent dress with diamonds in her pitch-black hair. "Be careful. He's not who he says he is," she whispered, and in an instant she was gone like smoke. Tina went to bed, writing off the vision as fatigue and imagination. After all, the day before, her fiancé had told her about the ghosts that haunted the castle. After spending a few fabulous days in Scotland, Tina and Paul returned to New York to begin preparations for the wedding celebration. The young people had a lot to catch up on. There were only a couple of months left until the scheduled day. In addition, the future spouses were incredibly busy. Paul was preparing a contract with the Japanese, and Tina participated in several shows and photo shoots. The girl had nothing left but to ask for help from her only friend, who helped the bride to choose a wedding dress, veil, shoes, and other accessories. Her choice fell on a lace gown, hand-embroidered with pearls and tiny diamonds with an open back and a long train. The bride's head was to be adorned with a luxurious tiara. Meanwhile, all the newspapers were full of headlines that Paul Smith was getting married, and his chosen one was a young model, Tina Johnson. Some did not hesitate to write a blatant lie that Tina is expecting a child. But it was not true at all. The lovers had a pure and chaste relationship, and if Paul sometimes allowed himself to go further than kisses and hugs, Tina gently stopped him. More than anything else in the world, she wanted to belong to him body and soul, but she was determined to wait until the wedding. Tina herself did not notice how in the pleasant cares and wedding troubles came the most important day in her life. The girl, like all brides, was terribly worried that everything went smoothly. Preparation for the wedding was carried out with great scope, planning to become the event of the year. According to the designer's idea, the wedding was to be held in medieval style. On the eve of the celebration, more than 100 invitations were sent out, offering guests to plunge into a romantic Scottish fairy tale. The guests were happy to support the thematic idea of the wedding. Stately men in luxurious camisoles, embroidered with gold and silver threads, led their ladies by the hand, as if competing with each other by the richness and sophistication of their outfits. There was a light floral fragrance of lilies and tea roses in the air, which exquisitely decorated the columns and staircases. The knight's armor had been properly cleaned and shone in the stone hall, reflecting the flashes of fire. The designer's efforts had more than paid off. All the guests admiringly discussed the ancient Scottish castle. The day before the wedding turned into a luxurious citadel. Even Paul Smith's foreign partners were impressed by the grand show in the style of a jousting tournament. Every girl at least once in her life dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, just like a real princess. But then she grows up. They do not part with dreams of a beautiful prince in shining armor, who will take her far away on his white horse. And so Tina stood in the silver wedding days in which she had spent her very first night in the castle, and felt a vague uneasiness. Her mother Hilary was at her only daughter's side, helping her into her wedding dress. "Daughter, I can see that something is troubling you," Hilary began the conversation, noticing that her daughter was as sad and silent as ever. "Have you had a quarrel with Paul? Share your worries with me, and I'll make you feel better." "Ah, Mommy, I'm very happy," Tina objected, "but I keep getting a bad feeling that something bad is going to happen." "It's nothing. It's just fatigue and excitement. I thought you and your fiancé weren't going well, but don't have those bad thoughts. When I married your daddy, I was worried sick and fainted." "Really? Surprised girl? You never told me about it?" "What's there to brag about? Your mom was always a coward, but marrying your dad gave me strength and confidence, and then we had our little miracle who we loved more than life. I still can't believe that my little girl has grown up and is getting married," the woman said with tears in her eyes. "Honey, I love you so much." "I love you too, Mommy. You and Daddy are the closest people to me in the whole world, and I'm glad to hear these words. But you have to remember your husband too. Paul will be your nearest and dearest now. And Daddy and I will take a back seat. We will see you often and dream of grandchildren, with whom we will be able to relive the best moments in life." "I dream of a big and close family too," said Tina. "Paul is very nice and will probably be a great father to our children," said Hilary. "I know, honey. I think he's a decent man. Everyone says good things about him, and he loves you so much. Don't worry, baby. You'll be very happy. Just like Daddy and me. And now we must get down to the guests, and your fiancé is waiting for you, so get all that nonsense out of your pretty little head." Tina cheered up from her mother's wise advice, hugged her tightly and pressed herself against her chest, just like in her childhood, when she woke up from the sounds of thunderstorms. "Yes, Mommy, you're right," agreed the girl. "Now I'm ready to go out to the guests." Tina was led down the aisle by her father, proud of his beautiful daughter. That's the kind of daughter any father dreams of. Kind, caring, friendly, and hardworking, she never upset Daddy with her behavior or actions. and now his girl finally and irrevocably entered adulthood. Barely holding back tears, Stephen walked the bride down the aisle, handing her main treasure to Paul, the groom. Paul, not holding back his admiration, looked at his beloved and did not notice anyone around him. Having pronounced the words of vows, the newlyweds kissed under loud applause and cheers from all sides. The guests hurried to congratulate the young people. "Wishing them a happy married life and beautiful, healthy children," said some. Despite all the fears of the bride, the wedding celebration went flawlessly, without quarrels, fights, or any other unpleasant incidents. At midnight, Tina and Paul left the guests and left on a private jet for their wedding trip to the Maldives. Their first wedding night, like a magical fairy tale, took place in the villa that Paul rented for their honeymoon. The beach with snow-white sand, like powdered sugar, and the warm Indian Ocean were the perfect place for a romantic vacation for lovers. Tina's generous husband did not stingy, choosing the most luxurious two-story villa of all offered. Several bedrooms, living room, study, gym, and spa were at their disposal. On one side, panoramic windows overlooked the giant pool located in the backyard. On the other side, the panoramic windows overlooked the ocean whose gentle waves lapped the secluded beach. After flying to Dream Island, the newlyweds hurried to the ocean. Tina gladly put her face to the salty wind, inhaling the scent of freedom. Paul approached her and drew her to him. "Let's go for a swim," he suggested, and headed toward the water. "Don't be afraid, we're all alone here. The water is wonderful." The full moon was shining in the sky, illuminating everything around with its mysterious light, myriads of stars in the sky, like myriads of fireflies. Suddenly the night sky lit up with a golden glow. A bright point rushed to the ground like a fallen meteorite. "It's a sign." And what a sign. A shooting star. "We should make a wish immediately," Tina thought to herself. The girl hurried to make her wish. "I want a simple woman's happiness." And as if mesmerized, stepped into the water, following her husband. The water was indeed incredibly warm. Having bathed enough, the young people went to the villa. In the morning, the newlyweds had a rich and hearty breakfast: Viennese waffles, toast with cheese and ham, a fruit basket, oriental sweets, and freshly squeezed juice. Pouring the juice into a tall carafe, they joked and fooled around, feeding each other fruit and sweets. This was how the days of their honeymoon passed uncomplicatedly. From morning until evening they relaxed in the hammock, sunbathed and splashed in the ocean, enjoying each other's company. Sometimes the lovers left the island to unwind. Sea walks, diving, and excursions allowed them to get acquainted with the life on the island, traditions and customs of the locals. Nothing foreshadowed trouble, but the day before the end of the vacation, tragedy happened. Paul, an excellent swimmer and diver, decided to surprise his beloved by jumping into the water from the pier. He noticed too late that the tide was out. Hitting his head on the bottom, the man lost consciousness. He was saved by Tina, who fortunately could swim quite well. Rushing to her husband's aid, the fragile girl pulled him ashore on her own. The adrenaline rush and fear for her lover's life must have done their job. After contacting the emergency services, Tina managed to get Paul loaded onto a boat and taken to a local clinic, where doctors made a disappointing diagnosis: concussion. But the worst part was a fractured spine. Everything after that was a blur. All this time Tina was next to her husband, holding his hand tightly. She didn't eat and hardly slept. She flew to Chicago in a tracksuit, not having time to change and take things from the villa. After all, Paul needed urgent medical attention, on which much depended. To the best clinics in Chicago. The diagnosis of Maldivian doctors unfortunately confirmed. Paul courageously underwent several operations on the spine. As no one else, he was supported by his wife, taking care of him and instilling faith and hope. The girl had to forget about her modeling career to always be close to her beloved. However, Tina never once reproached her husband for his illness, perfectly understanding that he is much harder than she is, and just one careless word can deeply hurt the spouse. Yes, it wasn't easy for her. Not the kind of family life I dreamed of, thought the young girl. At night, while Paul slept, she cried in the bathroom, and in the morning smiled at her husband and inquired about his health. Rehabilitation of the husband required an impressive cost. And then the family had to sell an apartment in the center of Chicago in the car, as the business Paul could not engage in for health reasons. The reins were taken over by his deputy, but it did not lead to anything. The firm was still making losses, and competitors, taking advantage of the situation, absorbed it. But Tina did not care about that, for her husband and his health were the main thing. She prayed to all the gods for his recovery. After a few months of intensive training with the use of medication, the first results became visible. Paul began to move his fingers and feel his legs. The doctors said that this was a great progress for the patient, and in the future the man would be able to walk. In many respects it was the merit of Tina, who helped her husband to believe in his strength. The girl, without sparing herself, practiced with him in the pool, made sure that he took his medication on time, and did not miss training. However, keeping him strong in spirit, Tina completely forgot about herself. The slender girl became thin, ate little and slept poorly. The once statuesque and well-groomed beauty now looked like a dried-up girl. Not trusting outsiders, she refused any help. And who better to look after her husband than herself? But it couldn't go on like this. By saving her husband, Tina was ruining herself. And then it became clear that the girl was pregnant. When tragedy struck Paul, the last thing his wife paid attention to was a broken cycle. Constant nausea and dizziness. She wrote off to fatigue and sleep deprivation. Tina continued to take care of her husband, not sparing herself. But a timely pregnancy test made the girl look at her health in a different way after all. A new life was born in her. Paul was madly happy about the news. A light of hope lit up in his eyes. The determined man swore to himself that by the time the baby was born, he would be able to walk again. And then came to the aid of Tina's parents, who moved into the mansion to be near their daughter and support her in a difficult moment of life. But as they say, trouble does not come alone. One day, Paul had a dream in which he was walking and even running with his child again. Waking up in the middle of the night, he tried to get up, hoping he could make it. After taking just one step, Paul fell like a hamstring from unbearable pain. He hit a glass table, which shattered in half with a clinking sound. Lying among the shards, wounded and powerless, the man hated his weakness and helplessness.